Chapter 1. The caroller stared at Saul like she'd seen a ghost, right there on the snowy stoop while her group fumbled. "God rest ye." Saul's hand went to his coat, and I knew this wasn't music. This was a warning. The girl's eyes flicked past him to the street, where a sedan idled too politely for December. I said, "Miss, you sing like you're being paid to breathe." "Who's paying?" she whispered. They found him. And then the sedan's door opened. A man got out in the manner of somebody who'd like to pretend he wasn't getting out. Dark overcoat, hat brim low, shoulders set like a filing cabinet. He didn't hurry, because hurry means you're afraid, and afraid means you can be pushed. He let the door click shut with care, then looked up the street as if admiring the Christmas lights and the respectable brownstones that had been minding their own business since before. Either of us was born. Saul's eyes stayed on him. Saul Panzer has eyes that can wait all night without blinking if that's what the job requires. "Archie," he said quietly, "get the girl inside." "I didn't know she came with the season," I murmured, but I was already moving. I stepped down off the top stoop and into the line of the carolers, smiling at them like I belonged there. The group was 6, 2 women, 3 men, and the girl, with scarves and mittens and sheet music in folders that had taken a beating. The girl was maybe 22, cheeks red from cold and nerves, hair tucked into a knit cap, and her eyes were too clear for a cheap amateur choir, professional or close enough. "What's your name?" I asked, keeping my voice light. Her lips barely moved. "Lila." "Lila," I said, as if tasting it. "All right, Lila, you're about to forget this song, and remember the simplest rule in New York. When a sedan waits too politely, you don't stand in front of it." The man at the curb started up the sidewalk. He wasn't alone. Another shape moved inside the sedan, and the engine stayed running, one of the male carolers. Round face, earnest eyebrows, looked from the man to me. "Is there a problem?" "There's only a problem if you stay," I told him. "You folks head on down the block and sing at somebody who wants it." "We have a permit," the earnest one said. "I have a headache," I said, "and my boss is about to have one too, which is worse. Move." Saul had opened the front door behind us. Warmth spilled out like a bribe. The girl's gaze snapped to the open doorway as if it were salvation. But she hesitated, because fear is one thing and trust is another. I took her elbow gently, but I took it and turned her toward the steps. "Easy," I said. "If you scream, you wake up the orchids." "What orchids?" she whispered. "That's the point. Come on." The man was halfway up the walk now, close enough that I could see his face under the hat brim, sallow, flat, a mouth that had forgotten how to smile. He wasn't looking at the carolers as a group. He was looking at Lila. "Miss Rusk," he called, and the name hit the air like a slap. "Hold up, we need to talk." Lila's shoulders jerked. So that was it, Rusk. That wasn't a caroler name. That was a name you'd remember from a missing person notice or a police desk blotter. Saul stepped out onto the stoop beside me, big in his coat, calm as a banker. "Wrong address," Saul said. The sallow man's eyes flicked to Saul, then snapped back to Lila. "She's coming with us." "With who?" I asked. "The merry men." He made a sound that could have been a laugh in a different world. "Don't play." "I don't play," I said. "I narrate, and I'm telling you, you've misread the neighborhood." The earnest caroler finally got the message that he wasn't in charge of the evening. He tugged at the sleeve of the woman beside him. "Let's go," he muttered. Their little group began to drift down the steps and onto the sidewalk. A messy retreat in mittens and sheet music. The sallow man moved faster, 2 steps at a time, aiming for Lila's arm. Saul's hand came out of his coat. Not a gun. Just a hand. But Saul's hands have put men on the floor without raising his voice. He caught the sallow man's wrist, turned it, and the sallow man's knees bent in a way he hadn't planned. "Go," I told Lila, and this time I didn't ask. I hustled her up the steps and into the brownstone, past Saul, and past the man's grunt of pain. I heard Saul say, "Tell your friend in the car to drive away." and I heard the sallow man hiss, "You don't know who you're dealing with." I shut the door behind us and slid the bolt with satisfaction. It's a good sound, that bolt. It says civilization is still trying. Lila stood in the front hall blinking as if she'd walked into a museum by mistake. The hall was warm and smelled of polished wood, and faintly, whatever Fritz Brenner had been doing to dinner. Fritz appeared from the direction of the kitchen, tall and composed in his white jacket, and took in the girl and me in one glance. "Mr. Goodwin," he asked mildly, as if I'd brought home a stray cat. "Company," I said. "She'll try not to shed." Lila stared at Fritz's jacket like it was a uniform for an army she didn't know existed. Is this a hotel?" "It is a sanctuary," Fritz said, and if he meant it as a joke, he didn't show it. "Please remove your wet shoes." He turned, already retreating, and called up the stairs in his careful voice. "Mr. Wolfe, Mr. Goodwin has brought a young lady." From above came the sound that every human being within range learns to fear, Nero Wolfe's voice, not loud, not strained, but full, irritated, and certain. "Mr. Goodwin," it came down, "if you have brought a young lady into my house for the purpose of a diversion, you have miscalculated both my disposition and my schedule." I looked up at the ceiling. "Not a diversion," I called. "A complication." "A distinction without merit," Wolfe said, and the floorboards above creaked. He was coming. Lila clutched her folder of sheet music to her chest, as if it were a shield. I shouldn't be here." "That's what everybody says right before they become permanent furniture," I told her. "Sit down." I guided her toward the red leather chair in the office doorway. She perched on the edge, not trusting the leather, not trusting me, not trusting anything except the fact that she was no longer in reach of the sedan outside. Saul knocked once, and came in without waiting for an invitation because Saul knows the house as well as I do. His hat had a dusting of snow on the brim. His expression had the calm of a man who'd just arranged a small correction in the world. "He left," Saul said. "The sedan, too. They'll be back." "Of course they will," I said. "Did you get a license?" "Covered," Saul said. Lila's eyes darted between us. "Who are you people?" "Private citizens," I said. "We pay our taxes and only interfere with criminals on social occasions." From the hall came the steady tread of a large man descending stairs with dignity, as if the staircase had been installed for his use. Wolfe appeared in the office doorway, wearing a yellow silk robe and slippers, a sight that can make a hardened cop feel underdressed. His face was set in a scowl of affront, his eyes taking in Lila, Saul, and me in a single, sweeping appraisal. He did not offer his hand. Wolfe rarely does, and never when inconvenienced. He looked at Lila as if she were a parcel someone had delivered without postage. "Explain," he said. "Name's Lila Rusk," I began. "She was caroling on our stoop. She recognized Saul like he was the angel of doom. Then a sedan opened its door like a mouth and—" "Mr. Goodwin," Wolfe snapped, "if you have learned to speak English, use it." "I am," I said, "just with ornament. Lila here says they found him, and a couple of gentlemen tried to collect her. Saul discouraged them." Wolfe's gaze went to Lila. It softened not at all, but it sharpened into attention. "Who found whom?" he asked. Lila swallowed. I didn't mean to come here. When I saw him," she nodded at Saul, "I knew he wasn't with them. I've seen him before, last month, outside the rehearsal hall." Saul said nothing, but the corner of his mouth tightened slightly. That's Saul admitting something without making the mistake of saying it. Wolfe's eyes flicked to Saul. "You have been haunting rehearsal halls?" Saul's voice stayed calm. "Job. I was following a man for a client. Miss Rusk was there. The client's target spoke to her." Wolfe made a sound in his throat that meant he was filing that away. He returned his attention to Lila. "You said they found him. Who is him?" Lila's hands clenched on the folder. Eddie, I said. "That clears everything up." Wolfe ignored me. "Full name, Woodward Klein," she whispered. He runs the choir, the one we sing with. We're not just caroling. We're hired." "Hired by whom?" Wolfe demanded. Lila's eyes went to the office walls. The bookcases, the desk, the big chair. Wolfe's office can do that to people. It makes them think confession is a kind of rent. A man named Waverley, she said. Mr. Waverley. Saul's eyes flicked to me. Mine flicked back. If you live in New York and you've been on Wolfe's payroll more than 10 minutes, the name Waverley makes a dent. Not because it's rare, but because a certain kind of money and a certain kind of trouble tends to use certain kinds of names. Wolfe's lips compressed. Waverley, he repeated. Lila nodded quickly. He has an office on Madison, a foundation, the Waverley Foundation. They sponsor music, they sponsor youth, choirs. They sponsor, her voice broke. They sponsor us. But Eddie found something. Papers. A list he told me we had to be careful. Then he vanished 2 days ago. And now they found him, I said, keeping it gentle. She nodded, eyes wet. A man came to my apartment this afternoon. He said Eddie was found. He said I should come with him and identify him. I didn't. I didn't go. I ran, I thought. If I went, I'd never come back. Then I saw you on the stoop and her breath hitched. I didn't know where else to go. Wolfe's face was granite with displeasure. That's his expression when the world insists on being messy. Why did you come here? He asked, and his voice made it clear he meant his house, his sanctum, his schedule. Lila looked at me as if I'd promised her safety. I hadn't promised anything. I just closed a bolt. Because, she said, Eddie said if anything happened, if someone tried to make me talk, I should find Nero Wolfe. The office went quiet in a way it doesn't often. Even Fritz in the hall stopped moving, as if he'd been struck by the name like a bell. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. He said that? Yes, Lila said. He said you only solve things if you want to, but if you do, you don't stop. I couldn't help it, I grinned. He's heard the brochures. Wolfe shot me a look that could freeze soup. Mr. Goodwin, he said, you will refrain from levity. I'll try, I said. No promises. Wolfe turned back to Lila. Mr. Klein is dead, he stated. Lila flinched as if he'd struck her. I don't know, she whispered. They just said. They would not be so eager to retrieve you if Mr. Klein were merely missing, Wolfe said. You know something. I don't, Lila insisted. Eddie didn't tell me what he found. He just said it had to do with money and names. And, she swallowed, and he said if he disappeared, I should take the folder from his desk. What folder? I asked. Lila's hands tightened. This one. She held up the battered music folder. I'd assumed it was sheet music. It was heavy for sheet music. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Give it to Mr. Goodwin. Lila hesitated, then handed it to me like she was surrendering a weapon. I opened it and whistled softly. Inside the folder were not carols. There were papers, typed pages, some handwritten notes, and a folded ledger sheet. At the top of one page, in clean block letters, was printed, Waverley Foundation, disbursements. Below it were amounts that made my eyebrows climb and names that didn't belong in choir programs. There were initials, there were dates, and there were notations in the margins that looked like someone had been doing arithmetic with anger. Saul leaned over my shoulder, just enough to see. That's why they want her, he said. That's why they want anybody who's touched that folder. I agreed. Wolfe's big hand extended. Bring it here. I brought it to his desk. Wolfe did not touch it immediately. He looked at it the way a man looks at a snake in his living room, interested, but unwilling to be impulsive. Then he adjusted his glasses and began to read. Watching Wolfe read is like watching a machine work. His eyes move, his face stays still, but the air in the room changes because his mind is turning something over and testing its weight. After a minute, he looked up at Saul. Mr. Panzer, he said, you will telephone Inspector Kramer. Saul blinked once. Now, Wolfe said, with emphasis. I said, boss. Wolfe lifted a finger, silencing me without effort. Mr. Goodwin, he said, this is not merely a nuisance. It is an intrusion by a foundation into my doorway, accompanied by coercion and likely murder. I will not have my house used as a staging ground for thugs. We will proceed correctly. Correctly, I echoed. That means involving the police and having them trample through the hall and scare the orchids. Wolfe's eyes flashed. The orchids will endure. I am less confident about my patience. Saul went to the phone in the hall. Lila sat rigid in the red chair, staring at Wolfe as if he were a judge. I stood by the desk looking at the names on those pages and trying not to let my mind gallop ahead, because when your mind gallops, you tend to miss the potholes. Wolfe tapped one page with his thick finger. "Observe," he said to me, "the pattern of disbursements. Not charitable, not consistent, not accountable. There is a concealed purpose." "Blackmail," I offered. "Possibly," Wolfe said, "or bribery, or both." But Mr. Klein was a choir director. He was not an accountant. That he compiled this indicates either remarkable curiosity or desperate necessity. "And desperate necessity gets you killed," I said. Wolfe looked at Lila again. "Miss Rusk," he said, "when did Mr. Klein give you this folder?" "Last night," she whispered. "After rehearsal. He was upset. He said he couldn't sleep. He said he'd made copies and hidden them. He said if something happened, this folder would prove he wasn't crazy." "Hidden them where?" I asked. "I don't know," she said quickly. "He wouldn't tell me. He said if I knew, they'd get it out of me." Smart, Eddie. "Too smart for your own," continued breathing. From the hall, Saul's voice came, clipped and professional. "Yes, Inspector, at Mr. Wolfe's. We have a young woman here who—" He paused, listening. "No, I'm not." Another pause. "Yes, papers, and a threat. I suggest you come." Saul returned, his face still calm but his eyes alert. "Kramer's on his way," he said. "He said if this is a Christmas joke, he'll arrest me and you both." "Seasonal cheer," I said. Wolfe was already frowning at the papers again. "Mr. Goodwin," he said. "Telephone Mr. Ori Cather." I blinked. "Cather, that's a new one." "It is not new," Wolfe said. "It is useful. Mr. Cather is counsel to the Waverley Foundation." I stared. "You know their lawyer?" Wolfe's eyes didn't leave the page. "I know many lawyers. Most of them are pests. Mr. Cather is a competent pest." I went to the desk phone and dialed. The line rang, and while I waited, Fritz appeared in the office doorway with the air of a man who will not let homicide ruin dinner. "Mr. Wolfe," Fritz said, "the roast is ready in 10 minutes." Wolfe did not look up. "It may wait." Fritz's eyebrows rose a fraction. "That's Fritz reacting." "As you wish," he said, and retreated like a diplomat. The phone clicked, and a brisk male voice answered. "Cather, this is Archie Goodwin," I said, speaking for Nero Wolfe. There was a pause that said my name had reached his ears, with the same sensation as a cold drink. "Mr. Goodwin, it is after business hours." "It's also after innocence hours," I said. "We have a young woman here named Lila Rusk. We also have documents that appear to be Waverley Foundation disbursements to individuals who don't look like youth choir sponsors, and we have men in a sedan trying to take Miss Rusk for a ride." Another pause. Longer. "Where did you obtain those documents?" "From Miss Rusk," I said. "Given to her by Edward Klein." Silence then, very softly. "Klein is missing," I said, because I hadn't heard official. "But someone's claiming he's been found." Cather's voice tightened. "You should not involve yourself." "That's going to be difficult," I said. "Since they tried to involve themselves on our front steps. If you're smart, you'll come down here and tell Wolfe what's going on before Inspector Kramer does it for you." "I will not," he began. The line went dead. I set the receiver down and looked at Wolfe. "He hung up," I reported. Wolfe's mouth curled in contempt. Predictable. Lila's voice was small. "Am I going to get Eddie in trouble?" "You're going to get Eddie justice," I said, and wished I felt as confident as I sounded. Wolfe gathered the papers into a neat stack, because even when the world is falling apart, Wolfe likes his edges aligned. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "when Inspector Kramer arrives, you will show him these documents but not relinquish them." "That'll go over well," I said. "Kramer will protest," Wolfe said serenely. Then he will reflect that he is not authorized to confiscate private property without cause, and he will comply. You're a romantic, I told him. Wolfe ignored me. He looked at Lila. Miss Rusk, he said. You will remain here. You will not speak to anyone without Mr. Goodwin present. You will eat dinner. Lila blinked. Dinner? Yes, Wolfe said, as if this were obvious. You are in my house. Fritz prepares dinner. You will not faint from hunger and create additional inconvenience. Lila's eyes went glassy again, and for a second I thought she might cry. Instead, she nodded, stiffly, like someone accepting a sentence. The doorbell rang. It wasn't the polite chime of a neighbor dropping in for holiday cheer. It was a long, insistent press that said the person outside didn't care how many bolts we had. Saul moved toward the hall, but Wolfe's voice stopped him. No, Wolfe said. Mr. Goodwin will answer. Of course I would. It's one of my job perks. I went to the front hall, slid the bolt, and opened the door a cautious crack. On the stoop, snowflakes drifting past the lamp, stood a deliveryman in a brown coat. Hat pulled down, face red from cold. He held a long parcel wrapped in paper and twine. Delivery, he said, and his eyes slid past me into the warmth. From who? I asked. He shrugged. No name, just this address. Paid cash. He didn't touch me, but I felt his presence tighten. Archie, he said softly, don't bring that in. I didn't intend to. I leaned forward and sniffed. The damp stain didn't smell like melted snow. It smelled like iron. The deliveryman shifted his weight. Impatient. You signing? Or what? I reached out and tugged the twine loose with 2 fingers, just enough to peel back the paper at the stained end. A hand rolled into view, pale skin, fingers stiff, a cheap ring on the 3rd finger. The deliveryman swore and stumbled back. Behind me, I heard Wolfe's voice from the office, sharp as a whip. Mr. Goodwin. What is it? I stared at the dead hand on my doorstep and felt the cold air rush in like the city itself had decided to join us. It's Eddie, Lila whispered from somewhere behind. And when I turned my head, I saw her standing in the hall, her face drained white, her eyes fixed on the parcel like it was the only thing in the world. Then the rest of the paper sagged, and a face showed. Edward Klein's face, slack, eyes half open, snow melting on his eyelashes. And tucked under his chin, pinned into the wrapping with a hatpin, was a card. In thick black letters it said, Keep Wolfe out of this. Chapter 2 back inside the brownstone. The cold came with us the way a bad idea tags along after you've said, yes once. Saul shut the door and slid the bolt. The sound was solid, final, and about as comforting as anything gets in Manhattan in December. It didn't make the dead man on our tile floor any less dead. The parcel lay there, paper torn back. Eddie Klein's face turned toward the stairs like he'd been trying to see the warmth and couldn't lift his eyes high enough. The card was still pinned under his chin with a hatpin, the message thick and blunt as a fist. Keep Wolfe out of this. Lily, who had told me her name was Lila, stood pressed to the wall, one glove clenched so hard the wool creaked. Her breath came in little white bursts that vanished as soon as they appeared, as if the house refused to let panic linger. Wolfe came out of the office doorway in his yellow robe like a magistrate summoned from chambers. His face did not change when he saw the corpse. Wolfe has many faults, but squeamishness is not one of them. His eyes went to the card, and the corner of his mouth tightened. Remove it from my floor, he said. That was all. No gasp, no prayer, no sentimental inquiry about the departed. Just a fence that someone had dropped a body in his entryway the way you might drop a wet umbrella. Fritz appeared from the direction of the dining room, stopped short, and regarded Eddie Klein with the calm interest of a man assessing a problem in presentation. Fritz has seen enough of Wolfe's work to know that murder is not an emergency so much as an interruption. Mr. Wolfe, Fritz said mildly. Dinner is. It will wait, Wolfe snapped. Fritz's eyelids flickered. Yes, sir. Saul had already taken out a handkerchief and was bending toward the parcel, not touching the body, just studying the wrapping the way a man studies the knots on a leash. No name, paid cash, I said. Deliveryman didn't seem like a killer, but I've been wrong before. Wolfe's gaze shifted to Lily. "Miss," he stopped. Her eyes jerked up. "It's Lily," she said, voice thin. "Lily Hart." I blinked at her. "That's a switch," she swallowed. "I didn't know who you were. I didn't know if you were with them. Eddie said never give your real name to anyone you don't trust." "That's a fine rule," I told her. "Except you're in my boss's house and he takes it personally when people hide their nouns." Wolfe did. His nostrils flared a fraction. "Lily Hart," he repeated, like a clerk confirming a record. "You will sit in the office, Mr. Goodwin, attend her, Mr. Panzer, telephone Inspector Kramer, again if necessary, and inform him that a corpse has been deposited at my door." Saul's eyebrows rose. "He's already on his way." "Then he may accelerate," Wolfe said. "And you will also telephone Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins. He is efficient." Saul moved to the hall phone without hurry. He has a talent for taking orders as if he'd planned to do the thing anyway. Wolfe looked down at the card. He didn't touch it. He rarely touches anything he hasn't decided to own. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "the impudence is remarkable." "That's what I admire about it," I said. "It's got confidence." Wolfe's eyes cut to me. "Do you think that is amusing?" "No," I said, "because I'm not a complete idiot. I think it's informative." He grunted, which is Wolfe for go on, then turned and led the way to the office. I guided Lily after him because leaving her alone in the hall with Eddie Klein's face peeking out at her seemed unkind and also unwise. The house has a way of turning any loose end into a noose. In the office, Wolfe settled behind his desk with the heaviness of a monument. Lily perched again on the edge of the red leather chair, hands in her lap, eyes fixed on the rug. The papers she had brought were still on Wolfe's desk in neat stacks. Money, names, dates. Now joined by a dead choir director and a warning card. Wolfe didn't waste words on comfort. "You recognized Mr. Panzer," he said to Lily. "Explain." Lily's fingers twisted together. "A bad winter," she said, barely audible. "Define," Wolfe said. 3 years ago, she managed. "My brother vanished. One day he was there, and the next, he wasn't. Police said he'd run off. He hadn't, he was steady, he had a job, he had a kid. People don't just leave their kid." Her voice snagged. I watched her throat work as she swallowed what she couldn't say. Wolfe watched too, but not with sympathy, with attention. Sympathy is a luxury for him. Attention is not. "A quiet man asked quiet questions," Lily went on. "He came to my mother's apartment. He didn't push. He didn't promise. He just listened. And when he left, I thought maybe someone was actually looking." She glanced at Saul, who had returned from the hall and stood by the door with his hands in his coat pockets. Saul's face was blank in the way it gets when history tries to claim him. "That was you," Lily said. Saul gave a small nod. "Your brother's name?" "Mark," she said. "Mark Hart." Saul's eyes narrowed slightly, as if flipping through an internal file cabinet. "Yeah," he said after a beat. "Mark Hart, truck driver, disappeared off a loading dock in Queens. Wife's name, Jenna. Kid's name, Tommy," Lily whispered, and her eyes filled. "You remember?" Saul looked annoyed at fate for being sloppy. "Job wasn't mine," he said. "I was helping, we didn't find him." Lily flinched as if he'd struck her. Saul shifted his weight, and for Saul it was nearly an apology. "I asked questions," he said. "That's all." Wolfe's fingers tapped once on the desk. "We will return to your brother," he said. "Now, your choir." Lily blinked, dragged back. "We're hired," she said. "Not a church choir, not a neighborhood group. We sing gigs, weddings, parties, whatever. In December we do caroling. This year we got a contract." "From the Waverly Foundation?" I asked. She nodded. "Through a man named Eddie Klein. He was the organizer. He got us the work. He said it was easy money." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "And the work consisted of standing outside certain buildings?" "Yes," Lily said quickly. Always the same route, always the same stops. We'd meet at a corner, walk 2 blocks, sing at a building, then another, then another. We weren't supposed to improvise. Eddie was strict about it. He said it was in the contract. How many stops? Wolfe asked. 12, Lily said. Sometimes 13 if they added one, but usually 12. And always the same buildings, Wolfe said. Yes. Wolfe leaned back slightly, eyes narrowing. A route is a rope, Archie, if someone knows how to pull it. I nodded. A rope can be used for guiding or choking. Wolfe ignored the second part as if I'd said it with my mouth full. Miss Hart, he said. What buildings? Lily hesitated. I don't know all the addresses, but I know some. There's an office building on Madison with a lobby tree taller than this ceiling. There's a brownstone on East 72nd with a wreath like a wagon wheel. There's a warehouse place down by the river where no one opens the door but we sing anyway. Wolfe's eyes lifted to the ceiling for a moment, a sign he was measuring probabilities. You sing though no one opens. Yes, Eddie said. It didn't matter. He said the people inside were listening. Or watching, I murmured. There's a building on West 53rd, Lily said, brow furrowing as she reached for memory. A medical office and a fancy apartment tower on Park, and she stopped, lips tightening. And one stop was always the same, a small office on 39th second floor. The windows were always dark. 39th and what? Near 6, she said. There's a sign downstairs for a travel agency, but upstairs, it's just a door. Wolfe's gaze snapped to the papers on his desk. He didn't look at them like paper anymore. He looked at them like a map. Saul spoke from the doorway. That's a drop route, he said. Wolfe's eyes flicked to him, possibly. I leaned forward. Lily, the night Eddie gave you the folder, did he say anything about the route? She swallowed. He said the singing wasn't the job. It was cover. He said he'd been stupid. He said he'd thought it was just rich people paying for atmosphere. But then he saw men coming out of certain buildings right after we sang. Men watching us. Men counting. Counting what? I asked. Our verses, Lily whispered. He said they counted how many verses we sang. Sometimes he'd tell us to do 2 verses and move on, sometimes 4. Sometimes 1. He said it wasn't for the audience. It was a signal. Wolfe's eyes half closed, a sure sign that his mind had begun to assemble something. A code, he murmured. Lily nodded quickly. Eddie started writing things down. He said he wanted to know what the signal meant. Then he found those papers. He said the foundation wasn't a charity. He said it was. She stopped, breathing hard. He didn't finish. Because someone finished him, I said. Her face crumpled. She pressed her knuckles to her mouth, eyes wet, trying not to make a sound. Wolfe watched her with cool impatience, not because he lacked humanity, but because grief is not evidence. The doorbell rang again, long and hard, and this time it had the angry rhythm of official authority. Saul's head turned toward the hall. That'll be Kramer, I said. Go, Wolfe ordered, without looking at me, and instruct him that he will not bellow in my hall. I went in the front hall. The parcel still lay on the floor. Eddie Klein's face stared at me now, as if he'd been waiting for me to do something sensible. Outside, the bell rang again, and a voice followed it, rough and familiar. Open up, Goodwin. I slid the bolt and opened the door. Inspector Kramer stood on the stoop, hat dusted with snow, coat collar up, face red from cold and indignation. Behind him loomed Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins, neat as a pin and looking like he'd been born in a precinct. 2 uniforms hovered a step back, trying not to look curious. Kramer's eyes went past me, found the parcel, and his mouth tightened. Well, he said, ain't you festive? Happy holidays, I said. Come in and mind your volume. He pushed past me, took one look at Eddie Klein's face and swore, not loud but with feeling. Stebbins stepped in, already assessing angles and distances like a man who measures everything because the world only makes sense in inches. Kramer turned on me. You called me for papers, and now you got a dead man gift, wrapped in your hallway. You want to tell me what kind of Christmas you're running here? The interesting kind, I said. Wolf's in the office. He'd like you to refrain from bellowing. Tell Wolfe, Kramer growled, that when there's a corpse, I bellow if I want to. He bent to read the card pinned under Eddie's chin. His eyes narrowed. Then he straightened slowly. Keep Wolfe out of this, he read aloud. That's so. Apparently, someone thinks Wolfe's a nuisance, I said. Kramer snorted. Someone's got taste. Stebbins crouched without touching, peered at the wrapping. Hatpin, he noted. Common used for pinning notes, wrapping paper from a general store, twine, cheap. Whoever did this wanted it obvious, not fancy. Thanks, I said. We were afraid it might be couture. Kramer's eyes snapped to me. Where's the delivery guy? Gone, I said. He didn't hang around to watch his handiwork. Witness, Stebbins said quietly, and a uniform nodded and moved toward the door to start doing what uniforms do, ask neighbors if they saw anything, and get told. No. Kramer stomped toward the office. I followed because leaving him alone with Wolfe is like leaving a bull, alone with a china cabinet. The china will not win. Wolfe did not rise when Kramer entered. He sat behind his desk like a king receiving a messenger. Kramer stopped in the doorway and glared. Wolfe, he barked. And then, remembering himself only because he hates giving Wolfe satisfaction, he lowered his voice a notch. You got any idea how it looks when I get hauled down here and there's a body in your hallway? Wolfe's eyes were cold. It looks, he said, as if someone has taken pains to annoy me. Kramer made a sound. You annoy people just by breathing. Who's the stiff? Widward Klein, I said before Wolfe could decide whether Kramer deserved the name. Choir organizer. The young woman in the red chair saw him last night, alive. Kramer's head jerked. Young woman. Wolfe's gaze cut to me, warning. I ignored it. She's in the office, I said. Lily Hart. Kramer's eyes narrowed at Lily, then back to Wolfe. You been collecting carolers now, Mr. Kramer? Wolfe said. I did not solicit her. She arrived at my door pursued by men in a sedan, bearing documents that suggest fraud and possibly worse. Shortly thereafter, the corpse arrived. Kramer's eyes slid to the neat stacks of paper on Wolfe's desk. Documents, he repeated, and you could hear his appetite wake up. Let's see them. Wolfe's hand rested on the papers like a paperweight. Number Kramer's face darkened. Wolfe. You may read them, Wolfe said. Under Mr. Goodwin's supervision, you may not confiscate them without cause. Kramer opened his mouth to argue, then shut it. He knew Wolfe was right, and that knowledge always makes him angry. He glowered at me instead. Fine, I'll read, but I'm tacking that body. As you must, Wolfe said. Stebbins entered behind Kramer, quiet and attentive. He nodded once to Wolfe, once to me, then looked at Lily. His eyes softened a fraction, which is as much softness as Pearly Stebbins ever risks. Kramer jerked his chin at Lily. You tell me what you know. Lily's shoulders tightened. She looked at Wolfe, then at me, then down at her hands. Wolfe said, Miss Hart will speak when Mr. Goodwin deems it prudent. Kramer's eyes bulged. When Goodwin, Wolfe's voice hardened. Mr. Kramer, you are in my office. You will not bully a frightened young woman. You will proceed with intelligence, or you will proceed elsewhere. Kramer's jaw worked. He looked at Stebbins, as if seeking an ally in common sense. Stebbins's expression stayed neutral, but his eyes said, Wolfe's right, and you know it. Kramer exhaled through his nose. All right, he growled. Goodwin, you babysit, I ask. That's the story of my life, I said, and sat down on the corner of Wolfe's desk, because it irritates Kramer and Wolfe equally. I guided Lily through it carefully, hired caroling, fixed route, Eddie's fear, the men in the sedan, the folder of disbursements. I did not mention Saul's earlier client or his prior job on Lily's brother, except as Lily had already said it, because Saul's business is Saul's Kramer, listened with his usual expression of suspicion, trying to learn arithmetic. When Lily mentioned verses being counted, his brows drew together. A code, Stebbins murmured, almost to himself. Wolfe's eyes flicked to him. Yes, Wolfe said, a code. Kramer glared at Wolfe. You already got it figured. I have begun, Wolfe said. Kramer slapped a hand on the desk. Well, begin faster. We got a dead man and a young woman, and you got papers from some fancy foundation. Which foundation? The Waverley Foundation, Lily said, voice shaking. Kramer's eyes sharpened. Waverley, he repeated. He looked at Wolfe. That the same Waverley that throws parties for the mayor and funds half the arts in town. Possibly, Wolfe said blandly. There are many Waverleys. Some are more corrupt than others. Kramer snorted. That's not an answer. It is an observation, Wolfe replied. Stebbins stepped forward slightly. Inspector, he said, if the route is fixed, we can list the stops, check who leases those offices, cross-reference with the disbursement names. Wolfe nodded once, approving. Kramer looked irritated that someone else had said something sensible in his presence. I want that list, Kramer said to Lily. I don't have it, Lily whispered. Eddie did. He kept it in his bag. His bag is probably on him, I said, or was, or is now wherever the person who wrapped him decided it should be. Kramer's eyes snapped to me. You got any idea who did the wrapping? If I did, I said, we'd be having a different conversation, and you'd be buying me dinner. Wolfe's face tightened at the word dinner, as if the universe had insulted him again. Stebbins said, Mr. Wolfe, may I examine the note? It is in my hall, Wolfe said. You may do as you please with it, as long as you remove it. Stebbins nodded and withdrew. Kramer stayed, glowering at the papers. You called some lawyer too, Kramer said suddenly. Cather. I heard his name when Panzer called me the first time. What's he got to do with it? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Mr. Cather is counsel to the Waverley Foundation. Kramer's mouth twisted. So Waverley's lawyer already got his fingers in this. He hung up on me, I said. That's his contribution so far. Kramer stared at me. He hung up on you. Brutal, I said. I'm still recovering. Kramer turned his glare back to Wolfe. Wolfe, you keeping anything else from me? Wolfe's tone was icy. Only my dignity. Kramer opened his mouth to retort, but the phone in the office rang. Wolfe's eyes flicked to it, then to me. Answer it, he commanded. I grabbed the receiver. Nero Wolfe's office, I said. A voice came through, clipped and tight. Mr. Goodwin, Ori Cather. I raised my brows at Wolfe. Wolfe watched me, expression unreadable. Well, I said into the phone, you remembered the number. Do not be flippant, Cather snapped. I have been informed that the police are at Mr. Wolfe's residence. That's what happens when bodies show up, I said. What can we do for you, counselor? There was a pause. Then Cather's voice lowered. You are in possession of documents belonging to the Waverley Foundation. Wolfe's eyes narrowed a fraction. I kept my voice light. We're in possession of whatever a dead man thought was important enough to hand to a frightened young woman. You will return them, Cather said. No, I said, a hard exhale. Mr. Goodwin, this is serious. Funny, I said. So is homicide. Cather's voice tightened. Edward Klein was not an employee of the foundation. Then why does your foundation's name appear at the top of those pages? I asked. Silence again. Then, very carefully, those pages are counterfeit. Wolfe leaned forward slightly, like a cat noticing movement. Counterfeit, I repeated. That's convenient. And if you persist in treating it otherwise, you will expose yourselves to complications. I smiled faintly. We've noticed. Cather's voice dropped even more. Mr. Goodwin, you do not understand what you have stepped into. I stepped into my own hallway, I said. Someone else stepped into Eddie Klein with something sharp. Another pause. Then Cather said, if Mr. Wolfe wishes to protect Miss Hart, he will bring the documents to my office tonight. Alone, no police. I felt my spine stiffen. I glanced at Wolfe. His eyes were flat, unreadable, but I could see the small pulse of satisfaction under the surface, because someone had just tried to pull his rope. "Where's your office?" I asked, stalling while my mind measured the shape of the trap. "Madison Avenue," Cather said. "You know it." I did. Of course I did. I'd been there once years ago when Wolfe had needed something from a different kind of lawyer. Madison offices have a smell of leather and money that makes you want to check your pockets. "What time?" I asked. 10 o'clock, Cather said. "Bring the documents. If you do not, Miss Hart will not remain safe." Then the line went dead. I set the receiver down slowly. Kramer had been listening, his face dark with interest. "That Cather?" he demanded. "Yes," I said. "And he just invited Wolfe to walk into a nice warm trap at 10. Kramer's jaw tightened. "He threatened the girl. He implied." I said, "Lawyers imply. It's how they breathe." Wolfe's face had hardened into something like stone. "Mr. Kramer," he said calmly, "you have heard." Kramer slapped the desk again. "Yeah, I heard. And you ain't going anywhere alone, Wolfe." Wolfe's eyes were cold. "You are not invited." Kramer glared. "To hell with invited. This is police business now." Wolfe's voice did not rise. "It is also my business, because it has been deposited on my doorstep, and because Mr. Cather has attempted to direct my actions with a threat." Kramer leaned forward. "You think you're going to outplay a whole foundation and their lawyer?" Wolfe's mouth curled slightly. "I think," he said, "that they have already made an error. They have assumed that I am motivated by fear. I couldn't help it. That's like assuming a bulldozer is motivated by manners." Wolfe ignored me. He looked at Lily. "Miss Hart," he said, "your brother vanished. Mr. Klein vanished. Now he is dead. There is a connection." Lily's eyes widened. Mark was not a singer," Wolfe said. "But perhaps he transported something. A truck driver. Queens. A loading dock. Money travels. Secrets travel. Men vanish." Lily's breath caught. You think this is about Mark?" Wolfe's eyes held hers. "I do not know," he said. Which for Wolfe is the closest thing to comfort. Honesty. "But I intend to find out." Kramer snorted. "You intend, meanwhile, I got a body, a threatened witness, and a fancy lawyer, Makin demands, Stebbins." Stebbins appeared in the doorway, notebook in hand. "Yes. Inspector, get uniforms to sit on this house," Kramer ordered. 2 outside. 2 inside if Wolfe will let 'em. Nobody gets near that girl." Wolfe's nostrils flared. "No one enters my house without my consent." Kramer's eyes flashed. "Wolfe." Wolfe raised a hand, imperious. "1 uniform in the hall," he said. "Quiet, and 1 outside. That is my final concession." Kramer looked like he wanted to argue, then seemed to remember that Wolfe's hall was not a precinct, and that bellowing would change nothing. He jerked his chin at Stebbins. "Fine, do it." Stebbins nodded and left. Wolfe turned to me. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "you will go to Mr. Klein's rehearsal hall. You will obtain the route list, if it exists. You will also determine who among the carolers was aware of the code." "Tonite," I said. "Yes," Wolfe said, as if time were a servant. "Now." Kramer barked. "You're sending him out when there's a threat." Wolfe's eyes cut to him. "Threats multiply when one remains idle," he said. "Mr. Goodwin will be careful." "That's what I'm afraid of," I muttered. Wolfe continued. "Mr. Panzer will accompany you." Saul's head turned. "Sure," he said, as if he'd already been planning to. Wolfe's gaze returned to me. "And you will take the documents with you?" I stared. "Boss." Wolfe's eyes glittered. "Not all of them," he said. "A portion, enough to bait Mr. Cather if necessary, and to protect them from seizure if Mr. Kramer loses his temper." Kramer's face reddened. "I don't lose my temper." I looked at Wolfe. "You want me to walk around Manhattan with murder papers in my pocket, while somebody's rapping choir directors like holiday meat?" Wolfe's voice was flat. "I want you to do your job. That's the trouble with Wolfe. He says it as if it's simple. Fritz appeared again at the office doorway, hands folded, expression composed. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "the roast cannot wait forever without becoming less." Wolfe's eyes flicked to him, and for a moment the entire case seemed to pause in deference to cuisine. "Very well," Wolfe said. "We will eat, Mr. Kramer. You will not remain to dine." Kramer's eyes bulged. "You got a dead man in your hallway, and you're talking about dinner." Wolfe's tone was icy. "Mr. Kramer, if you are unfamiliar with the concept of order, I cannot remedy that tonight." Kramer opened his mouth, then shut it with a snap. He turned on me instead. "Goodwin, you go with Panzer. You call me the minute you find that route list, and you don't do anything stupid." I smiled at him. "Define stupid. I need parameters." He swore and stomped out, shouting for men to get the body moved. His voice echoed in the hall like a saw on wood. Wolfe's face tightened in visible pain. In the dining room, Fritz served as if murder were a weather condition, unpleasant, but not a reason to ruin a roast. Lily ate because Wolfe told her to, and because shock makes your body accept food the way it accepts breath, without asking permission. Wolfe ate with the controlled satisfaction of a man reaffirming his sovereignty. Saul ate quickly, because Saul is always half on the street. I ate fast because if you don't eat fast in Wolfe's house, you don't eat. When we were done, Wolfe pushed back his chair and looked at me. "Go," he said, and that was that. Saul and I collected our coats. I slipped a slim packet of copied pages from Wolfe's stack into my inside pocket, enough to remind me that if I got jumped on the sidewalk, somebody would be thrilled. Saul checked his gun the way some men check their watch. In the hall, the body was gone. The tile was clean, but the air still felt colder. A uniform stood near the hat rack, trying to look like furniture. Outside, another uniform paced by the stoop, breath steaming. Lily's voice stopped me as I reached for the door. "Mr. Goodwin." I turned. She stood at the foot of the stairs, one hand on the banister, eyes wide. "You're really going to find out who did this?" I wanted to tell her yes, the way people say yes in movies, big and steady and brave. Instead, I told her the truth I could manage. "We're going to try," I said, "and if Wolfe tries, it's usually bad news for whoever's on the other side." Her lips trembled. "They'll come back," she whispered. "The sedan, the man on the stoop." "Let them," I said, and tried to sound like it didn't matter. "They've already made the mistake of knocking on the wrong door." Saul opened the front door, and we stepped out into the December night. Snow still drifted lazily, like it had nothing to do with us. The street looked ordinary. Lamps, parked cars, wreaths, a cab sloshing past. Ordinary is what New York wears, while it does ugly things. We started down the steps and across the street. In the shadow of a bare tree, a sedan idled too politely for December. Chapter 3. Saul and I went down the steps into a night that had decided to be pretty about it. Snow drifting, lamps glowing, the whole street dressed up like a card someone sends when they can't afford sincerity. Across the way, the sedan idled too politely for December, as if it had a right to be there. Saul didn't look at it. He adjusted his collar, stepped off the last riser, and kept walking. That's one of Saul's virtues. He doesn't waste energy acknowledging what he can't change in the moment. He said, "Lo, we're being followed." "I noticed," I said. "I was going to invite them in for coffee. You think they prefer cream?" "They prefer quiet," Saul said. The uniform outside Wolfe's place pretended not to notice us. He was under orders to be furniture, and most furniture in Manhattan has learned not to interfere. We walked east, not fast, not slow. Halfway to the corner, Saul stopped short, turned, and stepped into the lobby of a building with a doorman who looked like he'd been issued by the city. I followed, because if Saul takes shelter, it's usually from weather, with bullets in it. The doorman gave us the look reserved for men who don't live there and don't belong. Saul nodded at him politely, as if we did, and moved past into the little vestibule where the mailboxes were. He waited a few beats, then pulled the inner door open and walked right out the side entrance into the alley. I blinked. Neat. Saul glanced back. You want neat or you want alive? I'll take alive, I said. Neat I can do later with a comb. We cut through the alley, came out on the next street, and flagged a cab that was already sliding in the slush. The driver had the weary look of a man who'd spent the day listening to people explain why he should be grateful to drive them. 30, 4th and 6th, Saul said, and we got in. As the cab pulled out, I craned my neck through the rear window. The sedan was still across from Wolfe's brownstone, idling like a good little threat. Either they didn't see our alley trick, or they had enough patience to wait and see what else was delivered. Maybe think we'll come back, I said. Saul's mouth tightened. They think they can. We rode in silence for a minute, the tires hissing through slush. I had Eddie Klein's papers in my inside pocket, and I could feel them like a small, hard promise. Wolfe had sent us to the rehearsal hall for a route list, but after that body on the stoop and that note, it was obvious we were no longer collecting information. We were collecting targets. The church was called St. Dimphna's, which sounded like it ought to come with a pamphlet. It sat wedged between a dry cleaner and a storefront that sold cheap electronics, its stone face grimy from the city's love affair, with soot. Christmas lights were strung along the iron fence, blinking bravely at traffic. A few people hurried past with collars up and eyes down, as if December had trained them not to look too closely at anything. We went down the side steps into the basement entrance, where the smell hit first, old hymnals, damp stone, and something newer that didn't belong in a church, like fresh cigarette smoke and cheap aftershave. Secrets have sense if you pay attention. A hand-lettered sign pointed to rehearsal room. We followed it, our shoes squeaking on the tile, and reached a heavy door with scuffed paint. Saul tried the knob, opened it, and we stepped into a low-ceilinged room with folding chairs, a piano that had seen better decades, and a cluster of people bundled in scarves, as if the heat had never heard of them. There were 8 singers, more or less, 2 women with faces that said they'd rather be anywhere else, a young man with a baritone jaw, another with nervous hands, and one older woman who stared at us like we were interrupting her taxes. A couple of music stands were set up. A stack of hymnals sat on a table against the wall, as if someone had dragged them out for camouflage at the front of the room. By the piano stood a man with a smile too bright for a basement. He was in his 30s, lean, hair slicked back, sweater neat, eyes quick. He held a conductor's baton the way some men hold a cigarette, as a prop that makes them feel in charge. He stepped forward, smile widening. "Can I help you?" "Depends," I said. "Are you Ben Rusk?" His smile didn't change, but his eyes sharpened. "I am." "And you are?" "Archie Goodwin," I said. "This is Saul Panzer." One of the singers made a small sound like a swallowed gasp. The young baritone jaw flicked his gaze to Saul and then away again. Ben Rusk's smile stayed on his face like it had been glued. "Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Panzer, this is unexpected. You've had a rough week," I said. Unexpected is the theme. His baton paused midair. "If you mean Edward Klein." "I do," I said. "He's dead." The room changed. You could feel it, shoulders tightened, eyes dropped. Somebody's breath hitched. Ben Rusk blinked once, slow. Then he nodded as if he'd been told the weather forecast. "I'm sorry to hear that." "So is he," I said. "He's not expressing it." Rusk's smile faltered a hair, then returned, brighter. "What exactly do you want from me?" "A list," I said. "Of the route, the stops, the buildings you've been caroling at." Rusk's baton lowered slightly. "Why would I have that?" "Because you're the choir director," I said, "and because you like being in control." His eyes flashed. "I direct music. Eddie handled schedules." "And now Eddie's not handling anything," I said. "So the schedule has to be somewhere, unless the route was a figment, and you all just wander like happy snowflakes." One of the women's sharp nose, worried eyes, spoke up. "We're not supposed to talk about that." Rusk snapped his head toward her. "Mavis." "All right," I said. "So there is a route. Good. We're making progress." Rusk faced me again. "I still don't understand why your employer, Mr. Wolfe, isn't it, would care about carols." His smile turned sly, almost amused. A fat man with orchids, why would he care what we sing and where we sing it? It was a good question, and the way he asked it told me he wasn't just curious. He was trying to measure how much we knew. I said, Wolfe collects puzzles the way other men collect regrets. He doesn't like either, but he's better at puzzles. Rusk's smile tightened. So this is a puzzle. It's a corpse, I said. The puzzle part is who arranged it. Saul had drifted toward the hymnals without seeming to. That's another Saul virtue. He moves like he belongs, and people let him. He ran a finger along the spines, eyes scanning titles and stamps. I watched the singers. They watched the door. That's what struck me, in a church basement with a piano and a conductor. You'd expect singers to watch the conductor. They weren't. They were watching the door like it might open and swallow them. Rusk noticed my glance and lifted his chin. They're nervous, he said quickly. Police, rumors, Eddie's disappearance. And his reappearance, I said. Rusk's smile came back again. What are you implying, Mr. Goodwin? I'm implying that when people are scared, it's usually because someone took the trouble to scare them, I said. And when they're scared in a church basement, it means the church is no longer the safest place they know. That made me watch them too. Saul slid one hymnal free and opened it casually, like a man looking for a favorite verse. He flipped a few pages. His face didn't change. He set it down, pulled another, did the same. Then he paused. It was small. Most people wouldn't have caught it. Saul's fingers pressed the spine of one hymnal as if testing it, and the spine gave slightly under his thumb. His nose twitched, quick, fresh glue. If you've never smelled fresh glue in a church hymnal, count yourself lucky. It's like smelling paint on a gravestone. Saul kept his expression bland and glanced at me. Just a fraction. It was enough. I leaned my hip against the piano and smiled at Rusk. So, I said, you stepping into Eddie's shoes. That's a dangerous wardrobe. Rusk's eyes narrowed. I'm stepping into my own role. Eddie was useful. One of the singers muttered under her breath. Rusk snapped. Quiet. The singer flinched, the kind of flinch that comes from practice. I filed that away. Rusk wasn't just a choir director, he was a man used to being obeyed. Lily Hart, I said, watching his face. For the first time his smile wavered for real. What about her? Funny thing, I said. When she showed up at Wolfe's door, she gave her name as Lila Rusk. That hit him. His eyes widened a fraction, then narrowed again, calculations sliding into place. She did, he said carefully. He paused. That's her stage name. Stage, I echoed. In a church basement. It's what she uses for gigs, he said quickly. She thought you'd know her that way. Sure, I said. That makes perfect sense, except it doesn't. Rusk's baton tapped lightly against his palm. Where is Lily? At Wolfe's, I said. Under police protection. A murmur ran through the singers, relief for some, dread for others. The baritone jaw tightened. Rusk's smile returned. Brittle. Then she's safe. That depends who's pulling the rope, I said. Rusk's eyes flicked to the door, then back. Mr. Goodwin, if this is about Eddie's death, you should speak to the police. We are, I said. They're busy removing bodies from Wolfe's Hall. Meanwhile, we're trying to keep another one from being delivered in festive wrapping. Rusk's mouth tightened. And you think a route list will do that? I think a route list might tell us what the caroling really was, I said, and who it was for. His smile thinned. It was for money, that's all. Saul closed the hymnal with the fresh glued spine and slid it back into the stack, as if he'd changed his mind about singing. Then he lifted another, a little farther down, and opened it. He was making it look random, but it wasn't. He'd marked the bad one. I said louder. Who hired you? The Waverley Foundation. Rusk's head snapped up. Yes, through their arts office. Perfectly legitimate. Then you won't mind showing us the contract, I said. It's not here, he said. too fast. Of course not, I said. Contracts don't like basements. The baritone jaw took a step toward Saul. Saul didn't look up. He flipped pages. Calm, Rusk noticed the movement and his eyes sharpened. Cal, he said sharply, Cal. So that was baritone jaw's name. Cal hesitated, then stopped, jaw working. Rusk turned to me. Mr. Goodwin, you're disturbing my rehearsal. You're disturbing my homicide, I said. We all have problems. Rusk's smile turned hard. Leave. Not yet, I said. Saul's hand slid inside the hymnal stack again. He found the fresh, glued one, palmed it, and lifted it, casually, like he was comparing weights. Rusk saw it. For a beat, the room froze. Even the piano seemed to hold its breath. Then the overhead lights snapped off. Not dimmed, not flickered. Off 1 second, we had dingy yellow light and faces. The next, we had darkness like a fist. A woman yelped. Someone knocked a chair. The singers murmured. Suddenly alive with panic, in the dark, a voice said, calm and ugly, leave the books. Take the girl. It wasn't Rusk's voice. It wasn't Saul's. It was the voice of a man who thought darkness made him powerful. Saul moved without sound. I moved because if you don't, you get moved. I heard the scrape of shoes, a rush of air, and then a sharp intake of breath as someone grabbed a woman. Another voice, high, terrified, cried out, no. Lily, someone shouted, and that was the mistake. They thought, Lily was here, I barked. She's not here, you dumb. Something hit my shoulder hard, knocking me sideways into the piano. The keys rang out, an ugly clatter of notes that would have made a choir director cry, even in better circumstances. A hand grabbed at my coat. I twisted, caught wrist, and yanked. The man grunted. I swung my elbow and felt it connect with something solid, jaw or cheekbone. And the man went down with a thud. In the dark, Saul's voice was a low snap. Archie, back, I obeyed. Because when Saul says back, it's because he's about to do something efficient. There was another thud, a hiss of breath, and a man cursed. Then the room filled with the stink of cheap cologne and adrenaline. A flashlight beam snapped on. Someone had one, either a singer or an attacker. It wobbled across faces, Mavis with her mouth open, Cal with his hands half raised, Rusk pale and rigid, and a man in a knit cap hauling one of the younger women toward the door. Not Lily. The woman struggled, eyes wide, hands clawing at air. The knit cap man had his arm locked around her, dragging her like luggage. Saul lunged, the flashlight swung wild. The beam caught Saul's face for a split second, calm, focused, and then caught the knit cap man's eyes, and the man panicked. He shoved the woman forward, like a shield, and bolted. The woman stumbled, almost fell. Saul caught her by the arm, steadying her. In the same motion, he reached past her and grabbed for the knit cap man's collar. He missed by an inch. The knit cap man slammed through the door. I went after him, because I'm stubborn and because I hate letting men run when they've just made a mess. Saul followed a half step behind faster than his size suggests, and we burst into the corridor outside the rehearsal room. The basement hallway was dimly lit by a single bulb that didn't believe in brightness. At the far end, the exterior door banged open. Cold air rushed in. I saw the knit cap man's back as he ran up the steps. Stop! I shouted. Because shouting feels good even when it doesn't work. We hit the steps. Snow slapped my face. The man burst out onto the sidewalk, and a sedan that had no business being there at that moment rolled forward smoothly, passenger door already open, too polite for December. The knit cap man shoved into the passenger seat. The door slammed. The sedan surged away, tires spraying slush. I stood on the top step, chest heaving, watching taillights vanish into the city. Saul stood beside me, not breathing hard at all. He didn't curse. Saul saves his anger for when it's useful. What did they take? I demanded. Saul's eyes were on the street, scanning. They wanted Lily. he said. They didn't get her. Then why grab anyone, I said. To punish, Saul said, or to distract. My mind snapped back. The hymnals. Saul's hand went inside his coat and came out with a hymnal, plain, battered, and now suddenly worth more than its weight in cash. They said, "Leave the books," he said. So I didn't. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Good. From inside, frantic footsteps and voices spilled into the corridor. Rusk appeared in the doorway, face white, baton forgotten. "What happened?" he demanded. "Who was that?" "Friends of yours," I said. "Or friends of your employer." Rusk's eyes flashed. "This is insane." "Welcome to it," I said. "Who did they take?" Mavis stumbled out behind him, crying. "They took Jess," she sobbed. "Jessica. She's only 19. Cal stood in the doorway with fists clenched, not helping, just watching. His gaze flicked to Saul's coat where the hymnal had disappeared. Rusk saw it too. His voice went tight. "Mr. Panzer, put that back." Saul's expression stayed calm. "Number, you can't." Rusk began. "Oh, he can," I said, "especially when the other option is leaving it for the nice men who black out church basements." Rusk's mouth worked. His smile was gone now. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand you're either scared of them or working for them," I said. "And I'm not in the mood to guess which." Rusk's eyes flicked toward the street, as if he expected the sedan to come back and correct us. "Give me the book," he said, voice low. "Please." That please was the first human thing I'd heard from him. It didn't make me trust him. It made me more curious, Saul said. "Tell us what's in it." Rusk's jaw tightened. He glanced at the singers behind him, Mavis crying, Cal rigid, the others pale and shaking. He swallowed. "It's not mine," he said. "It was Eddie's." "Eddie's dead," I said. "So it's up for grabs." Rusk's eyes went hard. "If you take that out of here, you'll get people killed." "Jess just got taken out of here," I snapped. "You want to talk about people killed? Start with her." Rusk flinched just slightly. "I didn't." "No one ever does," I said. "That's how it keeps happening." Saul's voice stayed flat. "Archie, call Wolfe." I nodded, already reaching for the church office door that led to a small lobby with a payphone bolted to the wall. It was the kind of phone that had heard every excuse a sinner ever offered. I shoved a coin in, dialed Wolfe's number from memory, and listened to it ring, once twice. On the third ring, Fritz answered, his voice calm as ever. "Good evening, Nero Wolfe's residence." "It's Archie," I said. "Put Wolfe on." There was a pause, and then Fritz said something that made the air go thin. "Mr. Goodwin," Fritz said carefully, "you must return at once." My hand tightened on the receiver. "What happened?" "Miss Hart," Fritz said, "is no longer in the house." For a second I didn't understand. My mind refused it. Like a bad note in a hymn, then it landed. "No longer in the house," I repeated. "Fritz, what do you mean?" "I mean," Fritz said, and for the first time his voice had a tremor of anger, "that while the police were in the hall and Mr. Wolfe was in the office, someone has taken her." I stared at the payphone, hearing the dial tone hum like a nerve. In the basement behind me, Mavis's crying rose, raw and helpless. 2 girls, 1 sedan. And on my side, inside my coat, a hymnal with a stitched, shut spine chapter 4, when Fritz said, in that careful voice of his, that Miss Hart was no longer in the house. The payphone felt suddenly too small for my hand. "Fritz," I said. "How?" "I do not know," he replied. There was a policeman in the hall. Mr. Wolfe was in the office with Inspector Kramer. Miss Hart went to the powder room. She did not return. "Tell Wolfe I'm coming," I said. "Yes, sir," Fritz said, and I could hear the tightness under his calm. Fritz does not like disorder, and he likes cruelty even less. I slammed the receiver down hard enough to make the phone rattle. Saul was 2 steps away, eyes on my face, and he didn't ask what happened because he could see it. "Lily's gone," I said. Saul's jaw tightened. "From Wolfe's house." I nodded. taken. For 1 second, the church basement corridor seemed to tilt. Too many moving pieces, too many people being treated like parcels. Behind us, voices rose in the rehearsal room. Mavis crying about Jess, singers babbling over one another, and Ben Rusk barking orders he wasn't entitled to anymore. "Go," Saul said. "Not yet," I said, and started back toward the rehearsal door, because I had 2 instincts that rarely fail. One, when something bad happens, it's usually connected to whatever's happening right in front of you, and 2, when men grab girls, somebody nearby knows why. The rehearsal room was still half in darkness, lit now only by a shaky flashlight beam and the faint spill from the hall. People were clustered in knots like frightened birds. The piano sat crooked where I'd bumped it, keys smudged. Ben Rusk stood near the table of hymnals, pale, his baton gone, hands lifted as if he could stop the room from falling apart by sheer authority. He saw me and snapped, What did you do?" I let the question pass through me. "Where's the light switch?" I demanded. Mavis pointed with a trembling hand. Saul moved past her, found the panel by the door, and flicked the switch. Nothing happened. "Breaker," Saul said. "Of course," I muttered. "Even the electricity wants out." The young man named Cal, baritone jaw, hovered near the back wall, eyes darting. The older woman stared at Ben Rusk with a kind of exhausted hatred that told me she'd been paying dues for a while. "Who was that?" Rusk demanded again, voice rising. "Who did this?" "People you're afraid of," I said, "which makes me interested in you." He took a step toward me, hands clenched. "This is my rehearsal. It's a kidnapping scene," I said. "And now my boss's witness has been taken too." That froze him. "Just for a beat, Lily," he said, and the word came out wrong. Too quick, too familiar. "You know her name," I said. His eyes flicked away. She's one of my singers." "She was," I said. "Now she's a target." Rusk's throat worked. He looked around the room, and for the first time his eyes didn't look smug. They looked hunted. "Listen," he said, voice dropping. "You need to leave. You don't understand." A sound cut him off, a muffled thump from the far side of the room near the storage closet. Every head turned. Cal moved first, a quick step as if he'd been waiting for that sound. Saul moved at the same time, but Saul moved like a decision. The closet door swung open. The light didn't come from inside. It came from the hall, catching the edge of a face and a shoulder, someone trying to slip out. Cal lunged. Saul caught Cal by the back of his sweater like a man snatching a dog before it runs into traffic, and I went for the slipping figure. There's a rule about chasing men in cramped basements. You do it fast or you do it wrong. I did it fast. I hit the closet door with my shoulder and shoved inside. It was a storage space, narrow, stacked with folding chairs and old cardboard boxes. The smell was dust and damp paper. At the back, a man crouched with his hands up, eyes wide behind cheap glasses. Not an attacker. A kid, mid-20s, skinny, with the nervous look of someone who thinks the world is always one step from shouting. "Don't," he gasped. "Don't hit me." "I wasn't going to," I said. "Unless you give me a reason." He swallowed. "I didn't do anything." "Then why were you hiding in a closet in the dark?" I demanded. He glanced over my shoulder toward the room. He said stay out of sight. He said men might come. Ben Rusk." That little slip landed like a pebble in my shoe. I grabbed the kid's coat collar and hauled him out into the rehearsal room. Saul was still holding Cal, who was twisting and glowering like he'd been insulted in public. "Let me go," Cal snapped. Saul's voice was mild. Rusk's eyes were on the kid now, sharp and furious. "Peter," he hissed, "I told you to stay hidden. I finished for him, because men might come, the kind who cut the lights and take girls." Rusk's face tightened. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know Lily Hart is gone," I said. "And Jess is gone, and Eddie Klein is dead. That's enough talking for me." Mavis sobbed again, loud and raw. The older woman put an arm around her without looking at her, eyes still on Rusk with that worn contempt. Saul's gaze flicked to the hymnals. "Where's the book you glued?" he asked, voice calm. Rusk's head jerked. "What?" Saul said. "Fresh glue. You were hiding something. Where is it?" Rusk's mouth opened shut. His eyes went to Cal, then to Peter, then to the stacked hymnals. A flicker of calculation crossed his face. And then he bolted, not toward the door like a sane man, toward the table of hymnals, grabbing the stack as if he could scoop the truth up and run with it. Saul released Cal and moved. One step, too fast for Rusk. But Rusk was frantic now, and frantic men do stupid things. He yanked one hymnal free, the one Saul had marked, and snapped it open. The spine split, something slid out. A thin envelope taped inside the cover. Rusk's fingers clawed for it. Saul reached him. He grabbed Rusk's wrist and twisted, and the hymnal dropped with a slap. Rusk made a choked sound. "You can't." "I can," Saul said. Rusk's eyes went wild. "They'll kill you." "That's their hobby," I said. "You're in the club already." Rusk's mouth worked, and then his gaze darted past Saul's shoulder, toward the doorway. For a second I thought the sedan men had returned. But it wasn't that. The overhead lights snapped on full brightness, cheap basement brightness, but after darkness it felt like an interrogation lamp. Every face blinked. Every pupil shrank, and in that moment, with the light back and the room exposed, I understood why Rusk had been grinning earlier. It wasn't confidence. It was a mask, because masks are easier to wear when the lights are low. Ben Rusk sagged. At first I thought Saul had hurt him. Saul's grip was firm, but Saul doesn't maim unless he has to. Then I saw the thin red line at Rusk's collar. It wasn't on his sweater, it was on his skin. Rusk's eyes rolled up. His knees buckled. Saul let him go, not because he wanted to, but because Rusk had stopped being a person and started being weight. He hit the floor, face down, arms limp, cheek pressed to the tile. Not praying. Dead, Mavis screamed. Peter made a strangled noise and backed away until he hit the wall. Cal stood frozen, eyes huge, hands half lifted as if he might catch the scene and put it back on the shelf. I dropped to a knee, not touching Rusk's wound. Just looking, the cut was clean and narrow, right at the edge of the collar. A razor's work, or a very sharp, thin blade. No mess, no drama, just a precise line and a man turning into a corpse. "Who did that?" Mavis sobbed. "Who?" No one answered, because the room had the same answer every murder scene has. Someone who isn't here anymore. Saul's eyes were scanning already, because Saul doesn't waste the first 30 seconds after a murder. He's looking for motion, for exits, for the smallest tell that says the killer is still close, I said. Everybody stay where you are. They didn't, humans rarely do. They shuffled, clung, backed away. But they didn't run, because the shock had their feet nailed down. Saul bent and picked up the hymnal that had fallen. He didn't open it yet. He held it like a piece of evidence and an insult. I reached for Rusk's hand because dead men sometimes keep secrets clenched. His fist was tight. Fingers curled hard enough to whiten the knuckles even in death. That meant he'd been holding something when he died. Something he'd decided mattered more than breath. I pried the fingers gently. There was a torn scrap of paper, crumpled and damp with sweat. It looked like a piece ripped from a lyric sheet, thin and cheap. On it, in block letters, someone had inked, second verse, second stop. I stared at it. Saul leaned in, eyes narrowing. "That's a direction," I said. Saul nodded once, and it was important enough to die holding. I straightened. My mind was racing now, not galloping. Racing because Wolfe hates galloping, and I've learned to imitate his habits when I'm scared. Second verse. Second stop. In Lily's story, the number of verses we sang changed. Eddie said men counted. So, the number of verses was the signal, the stop number was the destination, a courier route disguised as caroling. You sing 2 verses at stop 1, and someone knows. Deliver to stop 2. You sing 4 verses, and someone knows. Deliver to stop 4. The carolers weren't entertainment. They were a moving code. And now someone had just killed the man who might tell us the route. I reached for the payphone again, but Saul stopped me with a look. Call Kramer, he said, and Wolfe. I nodded, because Saul was right, and because my hands were starting to shake, and I needed something to do with them. The phone call to Kramer was short and ugly. Another corpse, Kramer barked, when he recognized my voice. You kidding me? I never kid about corpses, I said. Church basement, Ben Rusk, throat cut. Also, Lily's been taken from Wolfe's house. There was a beat of silence, and then Kramer's voice dropped into something like a growl. I got a uniform in the hall. I got a uniform outside. How the hell? Ask your uniforms, I said. But bring men, and try not to step on the truth when you get here, Goodwin, he snapped. If you moved that body. I didn't, I said. He moved himself downward. Kramer swore and hung up. Then I called Wolfe. Fritz answered again, and this time I didn't waste breath. Fritz, put Wolfe on now. Wolfe's voice came on, cold as marble. Mr. Goodwin. Boss, I said, Rusk is dead. Throat cut, and I have a note in his fist that says second verse, second stop. There was a pause that wasn't confusion. It was Wolfe's mind locking onto a shape. So, Wolfe said softly, it isn't a choir, it's a courier service. I exhaled. That's what I was thinking. Bring me the hymn book, Wolfe ordered, and the scrap of paper, immediately. You want me to, immediately, Wolfe repeated, and if he could have made the word heavier, he would have. I hung up and looked at Saul. Wolfe wants the hymnal. Saul lifted it slightly. He'll get it. I looked at the singers, who were clumped together like the remains of an orchestra after a fire. Mavis was still crying. Peter stared at Rusk's body as if he expected it to sit up and scold him. Cal's eyes kept shifting toward the door, toward escape, or toward someone coming in. I stepped toward Cal. You, I said. What do you know? His jaw clenched. Nothing. Wrong answer, I said. You knew enough to try to grab Saul in the dark. Cal's eyes flashed. He was stealing. He was saving. I cut in. Tell me what the stops are. Cal's mouth tightened. He looked at the other singers, then back at me. Eddie had the list, he said, voice low. Ben kept a copy. Where? I demanded. Cal's eyes flicked to the piano bench. Under taped. Saul moved without a word, crouched by the bench, and reached under. He peeled off a strip of tape and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. He handed it to me. I unfolded it and my stomach tightened. 12 stops, addresses, times next to each stop. A little notation, 1 verse, 2 verses, 3 verses, varying by night. The second stop was circled, a small office on West 39th, near 6th, second floor, the windows always dark, the same place Lily had remembered. I looked at Saul. Second stop. Saul nodded. Second verse means send something there. And what's being sent? I asked. Saul's eyes were flat. Whatever they don't want found. Behind us, sirens began to wail in the distance, Kramer's men closing in. Okay, I said, folding the route list and slipping it into my pocket with the copied disbursement pages. We give Wolfe the hymnal and the note. Then what? Saul's mouth tightened. Then we find the second stop before they do. The sirens grew louder, closer, the city rushing toward its favorite holiday entertainment. A fresh corpse. Kramer came in like he'd been fired from joy. He didn't bother with greetings. He saw Rusk on the floor, saw the singers' pale faces, saw Saul and me standing too calm, and his mood went from ugly to uglier. Goodwin, he barked. What in hell? Ben Rusk, I said. Choir director. Now a floor ornament. Kramer glared down at the body. Don't get smart. I'm always smart, I said. It's the only thing that keeps me warm. He snapped his head up. Where's Panzer? Saul lifted a hand slightly, hymnal tucked under his arm. Here. Kramer's eyes narrowed at the hymnal. What's that? A book, I said. Churches have them. Don't play games, Kramer growled. You got people getting, snatched and bodies dropping, and you're holding books like they're diamonds. They might be, I said. Just cheaper to carry. Stebbins came in behind Kramer, notebook ready, eyes sweeping the room. He gave me a look that said, "What did you do now?" I gave him a look back that said, "I'm just here for the atmosphere." Kramer jabbed a finger at the singers. Everybody stays. Nobody leaves. I want statements. The singers shifted, scared, but they didn't argue. Uniforms began to fill the room, stepping carefully around Rusk's body, with the clumsy delicacy of men trying to remember they're supposed to protect evidence. I moved to intercept the worst of it. "Inspector," I said, "tell your men to watch their feet. Truth is small, and it hates being trampled." Kramer's face reddened. "Don't tell me how to run my scene." "I wouldn't dream of it," I said. "But if you lose that scrap of paper in his hand, Wolfe will feed you to the orchids." Kramer blinked. "Scrap of paper." I held it up between two fingers. "This, and before you ask, no, you can't eat it." Kramer snatched it, read it, and his brow furrowed. "Second verse. Second stop," he muttered. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Wolfe's voice would have said, "that you are behind." But Wolfe wasn't here. So I said, "It means somebody's using carols like signals." Kramer's eyes flashed. "Signals for what?" "For moving things," I said, "or people, or money. Take your pick." Kramer glared at Saul. "Panzer, what did you find?" Saul didn't answer directly. "Saul rarely does when the question comes with teeth," he said. "We have information Wolfe needs." Kramer's nostrils flared. "You ain't going anywhere until I stepped in before it turned into a wrestling match, because a wrestling match in a church basement is undignified, and also time-consuming." "Inspector," I said, "you've got your murder scene. You've got your statements. You've also got a missing girl. 2, if you count Jess. Wolfe's got the head for patterns. Let us get him the pieces." Kramer's jaw worked. He looked like he wanted to lock us both in the confession booth and throw away the key. Then Stebbins murmured something in his ear, quiet, sensible, and Kramer's shoulders dropped a fraction. "Fine," Kramer growled. "Go, but you call me, and you don't go play in hero." "I don't play hero," I said. "I play Archie. Hero is a different salary." We left the church basement with the hymnal under Saul's arm, the route list and Eddie's copied pages in my pocket, and the torn lyrics scrapped back in my hand because I'd managed to get it from Kramer on the pretense of showing Wolfe exactly what had been written. Outside, the snow had turned from pretty to slick. The streetlights reflected off slush like spilled whiskey. The city kept moving, indifferent, as if it hadn't just watched another man die in a basement under a church named for a saint. In the cab, Saul sat silent, eyes on the rear window. "You think they're still following?" I asked. Saul didn't blink. "They're always following." We reached Wolfe's brownstone and climbed the steps. The uniform outside looked relieved to see us, as if the house itself made him nervous. Inside, another uniform stood stiff by the hall, face flushed, eyes fixed straight ahead. The tile floor was clean, too clean, like someone had tried to scrub the house of the idea that Lily Hart had ever been there. Fritz met us in the hall. His face was composed, but there was a tightness around his mouth that said he'd like 5 minutes alone with whoever had taken Lily. "Mr. Wolfe is in the office," Fritz said. "He has been displeased." "That narrows it down," I muttered. We went in. Wolfe sat behind his desk, shoulders squared, eyes bright, with the kind of cold fury that makes him more dangerous than any gun. The papers were arranged neatly. A glass of water sat untouched. His dinner, no doubt improved by anger, had been eaten but not enjoyed. He looked at Saul, then at the hymnal, then at me. "Proceed," he said. I handed him the scrap with the block letters. Saul set the hymnal on Wolfe's desk with care, like placing an explosive in a cradle. Wolfe opened it with thick fingers, peeled back the cover, and found the thin envelope taped inside. He removed it without tearing the tape, because Wolfe has strong fingers and delicate pride. He opened the envelope. Inside were two things: a small roll of microfilm sealed in wax paper, and a slip of paper with a single typed line, Waverley. Payment confirmed. Wolfe's eyes narrowed until they were almost slits. I said, "Courier service." Wolfe nodded once, slow. "Yes," Saul said, "and the route list." I handed Wolfe the folded paper. He opened it, scanned, and his finger landed on the circled second stop. "West 39th, he murmured, second verse. "Second stop," I said. "So whatever the signal was tonight, it points there." Wolfe's gaze lifted to me, hard. "And Miss Hart has been taken." "Yes," I said. Wolfe's lips compressed. For a moment he said nothing, and in that silence I could hear the house. Radiators, distant kitchen sounds, the faint, sacred quiet of the orchid rooms upstairs, all of it threatened by the crude fact that someone had walked into Wolfe's domain and stolen a human being like a coat. Wolfe's voice, when it came, was very soft. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "they have committed 2 errors." "Only 2?" I asked. "They have delivered a corpse to my door," Wolfe said, "and they have removed a witness from my house." His eyes sharpened. "They have made it personal." That was the closest thing Wolfe ever offers to a promise. He looked down at the route list again, finger tapping the circled address. "Mr. Panzer," he said, "you will go now to the second stop." Saul nodded. "With Archie." Wolfe's gaze snapped up. "Number Mr. Goodwin will remain here." "Boss, you will remain," Wolfe repeated, and his voice made it an order carved in granite. "If they have taken Miss Hart, they may attempt to communicate. Mr. Cather's demand for 10 o'clock has not evaporated. I will require your tongue and your temper in that order." My mouth opened. Then I shut it, because arguing with Wolfe in that tone is like arguing with a wall. The wall wins and you get tired. Saul's eyes flicked to me, a brief question. I shrugged helplessly. Wolfe leaned back. "Mr. Panzer," he said, "you will observe. You will not engage unless necessary. You will report. Do you understand?" Saul's expression stayed calm. "Yes." Wolfe's eyes moved to me again. "And you, Mr. Goodwin, will prepare for Inspector Kramer's inevitable intrusion and for Mr. Cather's appointment at 10. We will not be passive." "Meaning?" I asked. Wolfe's gaze returned to the microfilm. "Meaning," he said, "that the courier service has carried more than messages. It has carried evidence, and the second stop," his finger tapped the circled address, "is where someone expects to receive something tonight." He looked up, eyes glittering. "We will arrive there first." Saul was already heading for the door. I watched him go, then looked back at Wolfe, and for the first time since that parcel hit our tile, a small chill ran down my spine that wasn't from the weather. Because if Wolfe intended to arrive somewhere first, it meant he intended to spring a trap, and somewhere out in the city, 2 girls were being held by men who thought they could pull Wolfe's rope without getting strangled by it. The phone on Wolfe's desk rang. Wolfe's eyes did not move from the microfilm. "Answer it," he said, and his voice was steady. I picked up the receiver. A man's voice came through, calm, familiar, and too polite for December. "Mr. Goodwin," Ori Cather said, 10 o'clock still stands, and you will come with Mr. Wolfe." I felt my grip tighten. "Counselor," I said. "That wasn't the arrangement." "It is now," Cather said. "Bring the documents, bring the film, and if you have any affection for Miss Hart, do not involve the police." He paused, just long enough to make sure the next words landed. "And Mr. Goodwin, do not attempt to be clever. We have already removed 1 girl from your house." I looked at Wolfe. His face was calm, but his eyes had turned into something I'd only seen a few times, bright, cold, and absolutely certain. "Archie," he said softly, "they have just offered us their 3rd error. And the clock on the mantel, which had been minding its own business all evening, ticked loud enough to sound like a countdown. Chapter 5. Wolfe does not bustle. He does not dash. When the house is invaded, the witness taken, and bodies begin to appear like seasonal decorations, Wolfe's response is not speed. It is arrangement. He sat behind his desk with the microfilm in front of him as if it were a dessert he intended to savor later, and he placed people the way Fritz places courses, each where it will do the most good, with the least waste. "Mr. Panzer," he said, "you will go to West 39th Street. You will observe the second stop. You will not indulge your appetite for heroics." Saul, who has never once shown an appetite for heroics, nodded. "Yes." Wolfe turned to me. "Mr. Goodwin, you will go to Grant Heller." I blinked. "The shipping man." "The shipping man." Wolfe agreed. His money wears a clean shirt over a dirty chest. He is charitable, public and anxious to remain both. "Waverley donor," I said. "A conspicuous one," Wolfe said. "His name appears in this affair with a frequency that is not accidental." "You want me to ask him about carolers and coded verses," I said. "I want you to ask him," Wolfe corrected, "about what he transports." That landed. The courier service was one thing, the shipping business was another, and when Wolfe says transports, he doesn't mean goodwill. He added, as if it were the smallest detail, "You will also ask him about Wade Kersey." I stared. "Kersey, his security chief?" Wolfe's eyes flicked to me. "You know of him. He's the type you know of whether you want to or not," I said. "Big shoulders, small patience." Wolfe nodded once. "Then you will be cautious, and you will be quick. We have an appointment at 10 o'clock with Mr. Oricatha, and I do not intend to arrive uninformed." "Wolfe," I said, "we don't even know where Lily is." Wolfe's gaze held mine, steady and cold. "Number, but we know where she is not. She is not safe. We will remedy that." He looked toward the stairs, as if he could see through 2 floors and into the orchid rooms. "I will not be dictated to in my own house," he said softly. "That includes the removal of guests." A guest, that's what he called her. Lily Hart, a terrified young woman kidnapped from his hall between a uniform and a lock. Wolfe called her a guest because it gave the situation a certain propriety, and Wolfe likes propriety the way other men like a loaded revolver. Fritz appeared, silent and precise, to help me into my coat as if I were going out for a pleasant walk rather than into a nest of people who had already proven they were willing to cut throats in church basements. As I took my hat, Fritz's eyes met mine for a fraction longer than usual. "Mr. Goodwin," he said quietly, "be careful." That, from Fritz, was like an alarm bell. "I always am," I told him. Fritz's mouth tightened. "He knows me too well." "Yes," he said, which meant no. Outside, the snow had decided it had done enough decorating and settled into a hard, gritty slush that made the sidewalks slick and the gutters filthy. New York in winter is a woman who wears perfume over sweat and expects you to be grateful. I took a cab uptown toward Heller's office, which sat in a building that had glass, brass, and the kind of lobby that makes you feel you should apologize for being alive. The doorman's eyes flicked over me with practiced disdain and then softened, just slightly, at the confidence of a man who acts like he belongs. Confidence is half a password in this town. Grant Heller's office smelled of leather furniture, polished wood, and money that had been laundered so thoroughly it could pass inspection. A receptionist in a smart sweater made a call, smiled without warmth, and waved me toward a door. Inside, Grant Heller stood behind his desk like a captain posing for a portrait. He was in his 50s, broad in the shoulders and soft in the midsection, hair silvered but carefully arranged. The kind of man who shakes hands with politicians and then counts his fingers afterward to make sure they're all still there. "Archie Goodwin," he said, voice rich and steady. "Nero Wolfe's man." "That's what the paperwork says," I replied, and held out my hand. He shook it firmly, eyes measuring. "Wolfe doesn't usually send emissaries to my office. Wolfe doesn't usually get corpses delivered to his front hall either," I said. "This season's been full of surprises." His smile flickered, then returned slower. "I read about that," Unfortunate. Unfortunate is when your roast dries out, I said. This is homicide. Hella's eyes narrowed. Mr. Goodwin, if you're here to accuse me, I'm here, I said, to ask you questions while you still have the luxury of answering them in a clean room. His gaze sharpened, and I could see the instinct in him, not guilt. Exactly, but the reflex of a man who has spent his life keeping certain doors closed and resents anyone rattling the handle. A door at the side of the office opened and Wade Kersey stepped in without knocking. Wade Kersey was built like a filing cabinet, square, heavy, and meant to hold unpleasant things. He wore a dark suit that looked like it had been forced onto him, and his eyes were the color of old steel. He didn't smile. His mouth didn't even pretend to understand the concept. Mr. Heller, he said, and then his gaze landed on me like a hand on a throat. Who's this? My guest, Heller said smoothly. Mr. Goodwin from Nero Wolfe. Kersey didn't offer his hand. He didn't offer anything except the clear message that if this were a different building, he'd be asking questions with his fists. I smiled at him anyway. Wade, I said, still trying to make rooms colder. His eyes narrowed. Do I know you? Not personally, I said, but you've got that look. The one that says you'll decide later whether I'm allowed to leave. Heller's smile tightened. Wade, please. We're having a conversation. Kersey didn't move, but he shifted his weight a fraction toward the desk, positioning himself like a man who wants to be between Heller and trouble. Trouble, in this case, was me. Heller gestured to a chair. I sat. Kersey didn't. Heller took his own chair behind the desk, leaned back, and laced his fingers. So, he said, what does Wolfe want from me? Truth, I said, if you have any left. His smile turned thin, clever. You're suggesting I'm dishonest. I'm suggesting you're careful, I said. And right now, careful men get people killed. Heller's eyes hardened. I don't know what you're talking about. Then we'll start simple, I said. The Waverley Foundation. His eyelids flickered. I donate to many charities. I'm sure you do, I said. Nothing cleans a dirty chest like community music. Kersey's eyes tightened. Heller's smile held, but the muscles under it shifted. It's also good for a man's reputation, I said. And it's very handy if the arts can be used as cover. Heller's gaze sharpened. Cover for what? That's what I'm asking you, I said. Did you know your community music carolers were being used as a courier route? Heller stared at me a beat too long. Then he laughed lightly, the way a rich man laughs when he wants to make something sound ridiculous. Courier route, he repeated. Mr. Goodwin, that's absurd. Absurd is only a judgment after the evidence, I said. And right now the evidence includes a choir director delivered dead to Wolfe's doorstep, and another choir director bleeding on a church basement floor. Heller's laugh died, his face sobered. I've heard nothing about. Ben Rusk is dead, I said. Edward Klein is dead. Lily Hart has been taken. Heller's hand tightened on his chair arm. Taken from Wolfe's house, I said. Between a uniform and a lock. That did something. Heller's composure shifted. A small crack. People like Heller don't like it when the world shows it can reach past locks and uniforms. It threatens the illusion that money can buy insulation. Kersey's voice was low. You're saying Wolfe can't protect his own. I looked at him. I'm saying someone decided to test him. Kersey's lips pressed together. His eyes flicked to Heller, then back to me. That was not the look of a man hearing this for the first time. I leaned forward. Grant, I'm going to ask you about a place on West 39th Street, second floor, near 6th Avenue. Does that mean anything to you? Heller's face went still. Number. It was too quick, too clean. I let the silence sit a moment, like a weight on the desk. Kersey's hand twitched toward his jacket pocket, just a twitch, the reflex of a man used to reassurance in metal form. He didn't pull anything out. But the message was clear. Keep your questions polite. Goodwin, I smiled at him again. Easy, I said. If you shoot me in here, you'll ruin the carpet, and Wolfe will send you the bill. Heller's eyes flashed. No one is shooting anyone, Wade. Kersey's hand stilled, but his gaze did not. I let my eyes drift, casually around Hella's office. People think detectives look for dramatic clues, hidden guns, bloodstains, secret doors. Most of the time we look for the careless things, what a man displays without thinking. On Hella's desk, nestled among the tasteful clutter, pen set, paperweight, framed commendation, was a photograph in a silver frame. It was a caroling group. Same faces, same scarves, same earnest eyebrows, same Mavis, same cowl, jaw set, and Lily Hart, cheeks red from cold, singing with her eyes half closed. I stared at it a beat longer than polite. Hella noticed. His hand moved, almost unconsciously toward the frame, as if to turn it away. He stopped himself. "Nice picture," I said. "You collect choirs?" His smile returned. "Careful. It's from a gala. The foundation had them perform. They were charming. Charming enough to keep on your desk," I said. "I enjoy music," he said, and his tone had the faint edge of irritation. "A man doesn't like being told what his desk says about him." I nodded toward the photo. "So you know Lily." Hella's eyes flickered. "I've met her, close enough to recognize her by her stage name," I said. His mouth tightened. "What stage name?" I gave him a friendly smile that had no warmth. "Don't worry, you'll remember." Kersey's eyes shifted again. Sharper now, he was tracking every word. He didn't like ambiguity. Men like Kersey prefer trouble you can punch. I changed angles. "Tell me about your shipping," I said. Hella blinked. "My shipping?" "Yes," I said. "What do you move for the Waverley Foundation?" His eyebrows rose. "Nothing. The foundation doesn't ship through me." "You sure?" I said. "Because the Waverley name appears on disbursement sheets tied to a courier service, and you're a man whose business is moving things without anyone asking too many questions." Hella's voice hardened. "My business is legitimate." I nodded. "So are choirs, until someone uses the verses as code." Hella's gaze held mine. The silence stretched. I could hear the building's distant hum, the soft whoosh of heating, the city's muffled traffic far below. Hella's office was a bubble of comfort. But even bubbles pop. He exhaled. Slow. "Mr. Goodwin," he said, "I am a donor. I write checks. I attend events. That is the extent of my involvement." "And Wade Kersey?" I asked. "Does he write checks too? Or does he handle the parts that don't fit on letterhead?" Kersey's eyes narrowed to slits. "Watch your mouth." I looked at him pleasantly. "I'm watching it. It's doing fine." Hella's tone sharpened. "Ina, if Wolfe thinks he can send you to harass me, I can harass you for free," I said. "Wolfe doesn't pay extra for it." Kersey took one step forward. Just one. But his shoulders rose slightly, and that jacket pocket drew his attention again. The air in the room tightened. Then Hella held up a hand. "Wade," he said quietly. Kersey stopped. He didn't relax. He just stopped. Hella's eyes stayed on me. "What do you actually want?" "A name," I said. "Who told you to sponsor that choir?" Hella's jaw tightened. "The Waverley Foundation approached me." "Through whom?" I pressed. He hesitated a fraction too long. Then, "Ori Cather." That was useful. Not because it surprised me, Cather had already placed himself in our path, but because it confirmed his hands were not clean. "Cather asked you to donate specifically for this choir?" I asked. Hella's smile returned, stiff. "He asked me to support community music." "And did he mention the route?" I asked. "No," Hella snapped. Then he steadied himself. "Number, of course not." I nodded slowly. "Then why do you have their photograph on your desk?" Hella's eyes flicked to it again. Irritation now, and something else under it. Annoyance at his own carelessness. "Because I liked it," he said. "Because I attended an event and someone gave it to me." "Who?" I asked. Hella's mouth tightened. He glanced at Kersey, then back. "A man from the foundation, Marvin Quill." I filed the name. "Quill," I repeated. "Title?" "Program Director," Hella said quickly. "Arts Liaison, something like that." Kersey shifted. "We're done," he said. We're done when I say, I replied, still looking at Hella. Grant, West 39th, second floor. Does Marvin Quill have an office there? Hella's eyes flashed. Number again, too quick, too clean. I stood up, adjusting my coat, as if the conversation had bored me. All right, I said. Then I'll ask Marvin Quill. Hella's face tightened. You do that. Kersey stepped toward me, blocking the path to the door just enough to make it clear he controlled the exits. His eyes were flat. You don't come back here, he said. I smiled mildly. Wade, if you want to give me orders, put on a uniform. Otherwise, you're just a man with opinions. His nostrils flared. For a second, I thought he might grab me and we'd see whether the office furniture was sturdy. Then Hella said sharply, Wade. Kersey stepped aside, reluctantly, like a gate opening under protest. As I passed him, I let my gaze drop, just a flick, and saw what his jacket bulge hid. Not a gun. A small radio receiver, earpiece cord tucked inside. He wasn't just watching me, he was being watched too, or reporting. I left the office with my smile intact and my nerves alert. In the lobby, I paused by the Christmas tree, tall, expensive, decorated as if money were a virtue, and glanced out through the glass doors. Across the street, a sedan, idle too politely for December. Patient as a hangman. My stomach tightened. The driver's silhouette was still. The passenger seat was empty, or at least looked empty from this angle. The car's presence wasn't aggressive. It didn't have to be. It was a reminder, wherever you go, we can be there too. I stepped outside anyway. The cold slapped my face. I walked to the curb and raised a hand for a cab, eyes not leaving the sedan. The sedan didn't move. A cab slid up. I got in and gave the address for Wolfe's, then leaned back and looked out the rear window. The sedan pulled out smoothly, as if it had been waiting for my cue. Of course, I muttered. The cab driver glanced at me in the mirror. Problem. Just a fan club, I said. Drive steady. He snorted. In this city, steady gets you killed. You want fast. I want alive, I said. Pick your own method. The cab moved through traffic, slush spraying, horns bleating. The sedan stayed behind us, not close, not far, perfect distance for intimidation and pursuit. It followed through lights, through lane changes, through a detour around a delivery truck, patient, skilled. I reached into my inside pocket and felt the folded route list and the copied disbursement pages. The microfilm was with Wolfe, but this was enough to make me a desirable parcel. My mind ran through what I'd learned. Hella had the choir photo on his desk. Hella admitted Cather had approached him. Hella produced a new name, Marvin Quill, and Wade Kersey had a radio. Hella was lying about West 39th. Not because I could prove it, but because he lied too neatly. Honest men hesitate for reasons. Hella hesitated only when his mind was choosing a lie. As we neared Wolfe's block, the cab slowed for traffic, and the sedan crept closer. The driver in the sedan still didn't show his face. He didn't need to. The car itself was the face. My phone buzzed, one of those little modern inconveniences Wolfe tolerates. Only because the world insists on changing, I answered without looking away from the rear window. It was Saul. His voice was low, controlled. Archie, I'm at 39th. My grip tightened. You see anything? A man went in 5 minutes ago, Saul said. Second floor. He carried a small case. A woman, I said. Saul paused. Could be Lily, could be Jess. Hard to see, windows are fog. My chest tightened. Don't engage, I said, because Wolfe had ordered it, and because Saul didn't need my advice to avoid heroics. I'm not, Saul said. But there's more. The building has a security camera. It's new. And the sign on the first floor, travel agency, looks like a cover. Nobody's inside. I swallowed. Hold. I'm 10 minutes out. I'll tell Wolfe. Saul's voice sharpened. Archie, be careful. Someone's tailing you. I glanced at the rear window again. The sedan was still there, gliding through slush like it owned the street. Yeah, I said. They're devoted. The call ended. The cab turned onto Wolfe Street. The brownstone stood there as it always did, solid and respectable, as if it had never hosted a corpse, and never would again. A uniform stood outside, stiff, pretending to be a lamppost. The cab slowed, and the sedan behind us slowed too. I paid the driver, got out, and stepped onto the sidewalk. The air was cold enough to bite. The holiday lights on the neighboring brownstones blinked cheerfully, as if they hadn't heard a word of what was going on inside Wolfe's walls. I took 2 steps toward the stoop. The sedan's passenger door opened. Not all the way, just enough to show a sliver of darkness. A man's voice came from inside, calm, familiar, too polite for December. "Mr. Goodwin," it said, "do not go inside. Get in the car." I stopped on the sidewalk, 1 foot mid-step, and for a second the world narrowed to that open door and that voice, because I recognized it, not Cather, Wade Kersey, and the way he said it, like an order he expected obeyed, told me he wasn't asking, he was collecting. Behind me, Wolfe's front door was only a few yards away. Warmth, safety, orchids and outrage. In front of me, that sedan waited patient as a hangman, and somewhere in the city, Saul had seen a fogged window with a woman inside. I took a breath and decided which direction to bet my life on. Chapter 6. The sedan's passenger door stayed open a few inches, like a mouth that didn't need to widen to bite. Wade Kersey's voice slid out of the dark, calm and proprietary. "Mr. Goodwin, don't go inside. Get in the car." Wolfe's front door was 3 strides away. A uniform stood at the stoop, stiff as a porch post, pretending he could keep trouble out by staring through it. Kersey had no business giving me orders on Wolfe Street, which was precisely why he was doing it. If you can command a man on his own sidewalk, you can command him anywhere. I lifted my voice just enough to carry. "Officer, is it city policy to accept rides from gentlemen who idle in sedans and issue invitations?" The uniform's head turned. He started down the steps, duty wrestling with the simple desire not to be in the middle of whatever this was. From the sedan, Kersey snapped. "Don't," I smiled toward the darkness. "Don't ask questions, that's unfriendly. You should try caroling. It softens people." The passenger door closed with a soft click. The sedan rolled forward, eased around a parked truck, and slid off down the block as smoothly as if it had never existed. The uniform stopped, relieved and annoyed at once. Relieved he wasn't going to have to do something, annoyed that he'd been tempted. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Trying for board." "Perfect," I said. "Just a man who mistook my face for his property." Inside, Fritz met me in the hall with offended calm. The house smelled of Polish and dinner and the faint, sacred hush of Wolfe's orchids upstairs, an atmosphere that takes the edge off winter and sharpens the edge of trespass. Wolfe was in the office, rigid behind his desk. "We're port," he said. I sat on the corner of his desk because my blood was still half street. "Grant Heller claims he only donates to community music," I told him. "He keeps a framed photo of the carolers on his desk, Lily in it, like he collects people the way he collects ships. He admits Ori Cather leaned on him to sponsor the choir. He gave me a name, Marvin Quill Foundation Program Man, and Kersey tried to collect me in a sedan out front. He had a radio under his jacket. He isn't only guarding Heller, he's passing messages." Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "In front of my house?" "Yes," I said, "which suggests he's feeling brave or desperate, possibly both." Wolfe's mouth tightened. Impudence. The front door banged, and Inspector Kramer arrived with snow on his shoulders and his temper trying. For once, to behave, he looked from Wolfe to me and decided to keep his voice down, which told me he was scared enough to be sensible. "Goodwin," he growled. "You all right?" "I'm holiday, themed," I said. Kramer's glare slid to Wolfe. "This ain't a parlor game, Wolfe. We got 2 missing girls." "I am aware," Wolfe said, "and I am not amused." He glanced at the clock. "Mr. Panzer is late." Saul came in as if the word late had tugged him by the collar. His hat brim was wet. his face flat with the look of a man who's had a conversation with a brick wall, and the wall had won. "The second stop is active," he said without preface. "First floor's a travel agency front, no customers, no activity. Second floor's locked, with a camera that's new. Men come and go with small cases. One sedan posted nearby." Wolfe's eyes sharpened. "Miss Hart." "Not there," Saul said. "But I tailed one man west. He went to an empty warehouse near the river. 2 guards. Quiet men, no smiles. I got close enough to hear them use a phrase twice. Same words both times, hymn book drop. That did it." Wolfe's eyes took on that gleam I don't like seeing unless I'm on his side. The look of a man who has found the hidden stitch in a coat and now knows where the whole lining runs. "Hymn book drop," he murmured. "So, the carols are timing," I said. "A schedule." Wolfe nodded once. "The carols are a schedule. The verses are a code. The stops are a map. And the merchandise is not faith." Kramer's mouth twisted. "Then what is it?" "Evidence. Money. Documents," Wolfe said, and his big hand moved toward the microfilm on his desk as if touching it would steady the world. "Anything compact enough to conceal in a hymnal and transfer under cover of cheer," Saul added. "Trucks hit the warehouse at odd hours. No logos." Kramer grunted. "Smuggling, perhaps," Wolfe said. "But note their method. They do not merely transport. They control, they abduct, they silence." I leaned forward. "Boss, we hit the warehouse." "No," Wolfe snapped, "not in the dark. Where they expect commotion, we will not blunder into their advantage." Kramer bristled. "I'll go where you will accomplish exactly what they desire." Wolfe cut in, noise, confusion, and an empty building when you arrive. Saul's voice was low. "They're anxious. Someone wants the drop tonight, no matter what." Wolfe's gaze flicked to him. "Exactly. They have chained themselves to a timetable. That is their weakness." The phone rang, I answered. A voice from Kramer's precinct line came through, rough and urgent. "We got her." My throat tightened. "Lily. Found in an alley off 10th. Ambulance took her to Bellevue. She's alive." A pause. "But she ain't talking, doctor. Says her throat's damaged. She can't make words." "In the office." Kramer's face changed as if the words had been slapped on. Wolfe's face went very still, which was worse. "Where?" Wolfe asked, voice quiet enough to frighten me. "Bellevue under guard." I hung up. Kramer let out a hard breath. "They found her," he said aloud, as if repeating it could turn it into good news. Wolfe's fingers closed on the edge of his desk. "They have silenced her," he said softly, "and they have done it as an answer to their card." He rose. "Mr. Goodwin, your coat, Mr. Kramer. You will come quietly." Kramer stared. "You're coming to a hospital in that robe?" "I am coming," Wolfe said, "because someone has used violence as an argument. I do not concede arguments." We took Kramer's car. He drove like the streetlights were personal insults. Saul rode in front, eyes on mirrors. Wolfe sat in back, a yellow-robed monument among grey coats, watching the city slide past as if it had disappointed him, which it had. Bellevue smelled of disinfectant and fatigue. A young doctor with cautious eyes met Kramer in the corridor and said, flatly, "She cannot speak tonight." Kramer tried to argue the word "won't," and the doctor shut him down with "can't." Wolfe asked one question. "Was it deliberate?" "Yes," the doctor said, and didn't add anything because there was nothing to add that wouldn't make it uglier. Lily lay pale against the sheets, eyes open and frightened, gauze at her neck. When she saw me, she tried to speak, and couldn't. Her lips moved. No sound came, and her hands clenched in helpless rage. Seeing a singer robbed of her voice hits a nerve even in a man who has heard too many screams. Wolfe stood at the foot of the bed, refusing melodrama. Yet his voice, when he spoke, had control so tight it sounded almost gentle. "Miss Hart," he said, "can you write?" She nodded, and the doctor handed her a clipboard. Her fingers shook as she wrote, but the letters were clear enough. "Kersey? Quill?" Kramer grunted. Kersey's Heller's muscle. And Quill is Waverley's, Wolfe said, eyes bright. The phrase you heard, him book drop, where? Lily didn't write. She raised 2 fingers. Second stop, I murmured. She nodded, fierce as if anger was the only thing keeping her upright. Then she wrote again faster. Like fear steadied her hand. 10, Madison. Wolfe read it, and his mouth set. Mr. Cather's office. Outside the room, a nurse touched Wolfe's sleeve, pale with the kind of nervousness hospitals teach. Mr. Wolfe. A call for you, the man said. 10 o'clock still stands. Wolfe didn't look at her. He looked at me, eyes cold with certainty. Archie, he said softly, they are hurrying. And when Nero Wolfe says that, it means the rope is tightening, and someone is about to feel it. Chapter 7. The morgue has a way of making you feel foolish for ever having hurried anywhere. You spend half your life in New York leaning on horns, watching clocks, being late, being early, being angry because a man in front of you can't decide whether to turn. Then you walk into a room where time has been settled permanently, and all the fuss you made for it looks like bad theater. Lily Hart lay on a steel tray under a sheet that covered everything except the part of her face that used to sing. Her cheeks were pale and smooth, and her eyes were closed as if she'd finally managed to sleep through the city's racket. The gauze at her neck was gone. There was a faint stain where it had been. You could see, even without lifting anything, that someone had arranged her silence neatly. I stood there too long. Kramer cleared his throat behind me, and even that sounded wrong in a room like this. His hat was off, his hair damp from melted snow, and his expression was the one he wore when the job got personal, and he resented it for doing so. "You okay, Goodwin?" he asked, which was absurd, because there was no possible definition of okay that fit the circumstances. "I'm fine," I said, and that was even more absurd. I wanted to rearrange the city with my fists. I wanted to grab every polite sedan in Manhattan and stack them into a tower, and set the tower on fire, and stand there warming my hands. But there are rules, even for rage, and most of them involve not swinging at cops in morgues. Dr. Vollmer came in, rubbing his hands as if he could scrub off the smell of death with friction. He was short, crisp, and professional, with the calm of a man who has met every kind of human mistake and learned not to take any of them personally. "Gentlemen," he said, "this is the young woman from Bellevue." "That's her," Kramer said. His voice was flat now. All the bark drained out of it. "They found her alive, then she's dead." Vollmer nodded once, as if confirming a schedule. "Yes." "How?" I asked, and my voice came out tighter than I intended. Vollmer's eyes flicked to me. "Poison," he said. "Quick and tidy. The kind you use when you don't want noise." I stared at Lily's face. Quick and tidy, like a correction. Like someone erasing a line in ink. Kramer's jaw worked. She was under guard. Vollmer shrugged with the faint impatience of a man who has learned not to argue with stupidity. "So are many people who become dead. Guard is not a guarantee. It is an intention." "What poison?" I demanded. "I will know more after tests," Vollmer said. "But the presentation suggests something fast. Acting administered in a drink, perhaps, or through something absorbed. No struggle, no bruising." He glanced at the sheet as if it offended him. Whoever did it knew what they were doing. "Of course they did," I said. "They've been practicing." Vollmer nodded toward a small tray. "Her personal effects, retrieved from her coat pocket, if you wish to see them." I wish to see them the way a drowning man wishes to see a rope. Kramer moved first, because he's a cop, and he clings to procedure when his temper can't help. He lifted the bag of effects, cheap plastic, and peered inside. Then he handed it to me. There was nothing dramatic. A folded tissue, a key ring with 2 keys, a couple of coins, and a matchbook. The matchbook was from a diner. The kind of diner that sells coffee strong enough to peel paint and eggs that taste like they've been threatened into shape. The logo on the cover was a simple drawing of a sprig with berries. Holly, Diner. It read, and beneath it an address in block print. 10th Avenue. Me fingers tightened. Under the matchbook was a strip of paper, torn from something cheap and lined, with a penciled line that looked like someone had written it in a hurry, as if afraid the words might evaporate before they got them down. 3-1-4 Fay Holly, that was all. Kramer leaned in. What the hell is that? I stared at it until the numbers blurred. 314. It could have been a code. It could have been a date. It could have been nothing. But nothing doesn't get written down and tucked into a coat pocket by a woman who knows she might not get another chance. It's something, I said, and my voice shook a fraction. Kramer grunted. Yeah, thanks. That narrows it. Volmer said. If you are finished, I have work. Kramer nodded stiffly, and we stepped out into the corridor. The door swung shut behind us with a soft click that sounded like the city closing its mouth. In the elevator, Kramer stared straight ahead. When the car jolted slightly between floors, he muttered, "Poison in a hospital, Christ, don't blame him," I said. "He probably hates hospitals." Kramer's eyes flicked to me. "You got jokes now?" "No," I said. "I got bile." He didn't argue with that. He just said low, "Whoever did this is gonna pay." I looked at him. "You'll charge them with murder, and they'll hire counsel, and you'll bellow in court, and they'll smile." Kramer's jaw tightened. "You got a better plan?" "Wolfe does," I said, and the first honest spark of hope I'd felt since Lily's lips moved soundlessly in that Bellevue bed flared inside me. "If we give him the numbers." Kramer snorted. "Wolfe's plan usually involves you getting shot." "Occupational hazard," I said. Outside, the snow had stopped pretending and turned into a dirty mist. Kramer drove me back to Wolfe's, because even Kramer has learned you don't deliver bad news to Nero Wolfe by telephone if you can help it. Wolfe prefers his tragedies in person, like he prefers his meals. We arrived at the brownstone with Kramer still simmering, and me still trying to keep my fists from rearranging anything. Fritz opened the door before we rang, which meant he'd been watching. Fritz always watches when Wolfe is displeased, because displeasure in that house is like thunder. You feel it in your teeth. In the hall, the uniform looked too young and too tired and too helpless. He stared at me the way men stare at a bad outcome they think might be their fault. Fritz said quietly, "Mr. Wolfe is in the office." He didn't ask. Fritz never asks when he already knows the answer. Wolfe sat behind his desk, shoulders squared, hands resting on the arms of his chair, as if gripping it kept the world from tipping. Saul was there too, standing by the side table with his coat still on, looking like he hadn't sat down in hours. Pearlie Stebbins stood near the doorway with a notebook and an expression of restrained disgust that said the day had not improved his opinion of human nature. Wolfe's eyes found my face. "Well," he said. I held up the strip of paper and the matchbook. "She's dead," I said. The words tasted like metal. "Volmer says poison. Quick. Tidy." For a moment Wolfe didn't move. Then his lids lowered, not in sorrow exactly, but in something like careful anger. Wolfe does not wail. He does not slump. He absorbs, and the absorption makes him heavier. Kramer said, "Rough. They killed her in a hospital. Wolfe, poison under guard." Wolfe's gaze flicked to him. "Mr. Kramer," he said, "your department has been outplayed." Kramer's face reddened. "Don't start." Wolfe ignored him and took the strip of paper from my fingers. He read it once, 3-1-4, Fay Holly. He read it again, slower. Then he repeated it aloud, softly, tasting it like a man sampling wine he intends to judge harshly. 3-1-4, he said. Holly. His eyes lifted to me, the matchbook. I handed it over. Wolfe read the diner name and the address. Fritz appeared, silent, and set a small tray on the corner of Wolfe's desk. A glass, a bottle, and a plate of something that smelled like he'd bullied it into perfection. Wolfe didn't even look at it. Fritz, wise, did not insist. He withdrew as if he'd never been there. Wolfe said, "Beer." I blinked. "Now." "Yes," Wolfe said, and his tone made it sound like an order issued to the universe. "Bring it." Fritz reappeared instantly with a glass of beer poured properly, with a head that would have made a bartender proud. Wolfe took a sip, like a man celebrating a funeral, not with joy, but with ceremony. He set the glass down precisely. Kramer stared. "You're drinking now?" Wolfe's eyes were cold. "I am thinking, Mr. Kramer. Mr. Goodwin has brought me a pattern." Stebbins cleared his throat politely. "Sir, we have also confirmed." Wolfe held up a hand. "In a moment." He leaned forward, thick fingers tapping the strip of paper. "Archie," he said quietly. "Summoner's been moving stolen bearer bonds in hymnals, and the carols tell them where to pick up the book." The words landed with a click. Suddenly, the microfilm on Wolfe's desk, the Waverley disbursement sheets, the phrase Saul heard, hymn book drop, and the rigid route list from the choir all aligned like gears. Kramer scowled. "Bearer bonds? How the hell do you get that from 3 numbers and a Christmas plant?" Wolfe's eyes slid to him with faint contempt. "Because, Mr. Kramer, this is not a school play. It is commerce. Bearer bonds have 3 virtues. They are valuable, they are portable, and they are anonymous. A man can steal them and become rich without the indignity of leaving fingerprints on a bank account. But to monetize them, he must move them discreetly, one parcel at a time, through hands that do not appear connected." Stebbins said, "Careful. And the hymnals are the parcels." "Yes," Wolfe said. "In a church, no one questions a hymnal. In a choir's satchel, no one searches a book. A courier route disguised as caroling provides timing, location, and camouflage." Saul's voice was flat. "Warehouse by the river is the holding point." "Exactly," Wolfe said. "And the second stop, the office on 39th, is likely the sorting point. The travel agency below is a cover for foot traffic and plausible visitors." Kramer shook his head, frustrated. "Still don't tell me how you know. It's bonds." Wolfe's hand moved to the microfilm, which sat beside the beer like a small, hard truth. "Because the microfilm contains a list of serial numbers and denominations," he said. "Mr. Goodwin, when you brought me the film, I did not have time to indulge your commentary, but I did review it. The format is consistent with bond registries, and the Waverley disbursements are consistent with laundering payments to intermediaries to create the illusion of legitimate distribution." Kramer's mouth tightened. He hated being behind. He hated Wolfe being ahead more. I said, "So Lily recognized Saul, so they erased her. What about me?" The words came out sharper than I meant. Not fear, exactly. Anger at the idea that Lily's voice was taken, and her life finished because she'd seen one quiet detective once in a bad winter. Wolfe looked at me for a long moment. Then he said, very calmly, "You are more difficult to erase." "That's reassuring," I said. "They'll just use a bigger eraser." Wolfe's mouth tightened. "They will attempt to intimidate you. They will attempt to isolate you. They may attempt to poison you." His eyes flicked briefly to the beer glass, and I couldn't tell whether it was coincidence or warning. "But they require you alive long enough to serve their purpose." "And what purpose is that?" Kramer demanded. Wolfe tapped the strip of paper again. 3-1-4, he said. "Holly," Stebbins said. "Could be verses and stops." "Precisely," Wolfe replied. 3 verses at stop 1, 1 verse at stop 4. "No." He paused, eyes narrowing. "Not elegant enough, too easily observed. We must consider what Lily could do, injured, under guard, and what she could conceal." Saul's gaze sharpened. "She wrote Kersey and Quill." "Yes," Wolfe said, "and that writing likely accelerated her death, but she also hid this." He lifted the strip of paper between finger and thumb. "It is not a full message, it is a key." He leaned back, eyes half-lidded, voice steady. "Holly is the location. The numbers indicate timing." "Timing how?" I asked. Wolfe's eyes opened. 3-1-4, he said. "A sequence, and in this case, not verses. Hars." Kramer blinked. "Hars." 3, Wolfe said. 1 and 4, the interval between transfers, or the order of stops. Or, he paused, and I saw it happen. The moment Wolfe's mind caught a thread and pulled, his eyes gleamed. "Archie," he said softly, The carols are not merely a schedule. They are a calendar. The stops are numbered. The verses are counted. But the numbers Lily left are not about singing. They are about retrieval. Mr. Panzer, when you observed the second stop, how many men entered with cases? 3, Saul said immediately. Over an hour. Wolfe nodded. And how many left with cases? Saul paused. 1. Wolfe's lips compressed. So the inventory accumulates. It must be moved onward tonight. Kramer's voice turned impatient. Wolfe, stop talking, like you're reading a book. Where do we go? Wolfe's gaze pinned him. We do not go charging into a warehouse, he said. We go where the next handoff is scheduled. He held up the matchbook. The Holly Diner. I felt the muscles in my neck tighten. On 10th, I said. Yes. Wolfe said, a diner is ideal. Continuous traffic. No reservations. Strangers come and go. A transfer can be conducted with a matchbook, a briefcase, a hymnal, anything, without attracting attention. Kramer's jaw worked. Then we stake it out. We do, Wolfe agreed, but intelligently. He looked at me. Mr. Goodwin, you will go. I stared. Me? You, Wolfe said. Because they have seen you. Because they believe they can control you. Because they may attempt to use you as bait, just as they used Lily. My stomach tightened. Wolfe continued, voice calm as a blade. You will take the hymnal that contains the microfilm. You will take no other documents. Mr. Panzer will accompany you, unseen. Kramer snapped. Like hell. I'm putting men. Wolfe's gaze cut him off. If you put men in uniform in a diner stakeout, Mr. Kramer, you will ensure that no one arrives. These people are cautious. They have already penetrated your guard. They will recognize your presence and vanish. Kramer's face reddened, but he didn't argue, because Volmer's word poison had changed the shape of the room. When a crook can kill in a hospital, your badge feels less like armor and more like decoration. Stebbins said quietly, Inspector, we can place plainclothes. Kramer glared, then nodded grudgingly. Fine, plainclothes, but I'm not letting Goodwin walk in blind, Wolfe said. Mr. Goodwin will not be blind. He will be bait. That's comforting, I muttered. Wolfe's eyes held mine. Archie, he said, and his voice softened by a fraction, which for Wolfe is practically an embrace. They have made themselves dependent on their own system. We will use that. We will bring the hymn book. We will force a hand. Saul's voice was low, and Jess, Wolfe's gaze flicked to him. We will locate the warehouse by following the handoff. They must move the bonds onward, and they must keep their captives as leverage until the transfer is secure. His eyes hardened. Their leverage is diminishing. I looked down at the matchbook in Wolfe's hand, at the holly sprig stamped on cheap cardboard, and felt a cold certainty settle in. Lily had gotten this much out before they shut her down permanently. It was all we were going to get from her. Wolfe lifted his beer glass again, took a sip, and set it down with a soft click. Mr. Goodwin, he said. Go now. If the numbers represent time, the next transfer is imminent. I stood. My coat felt suddenly heavier. As I reached the office door, Fritz appeared in the hall, his face composed, but his eyes sharpened. Mr. Goodwin, he said softly. Your coffee. He held out a cup. For a second, I just stared at it. Dark, steaming, ordinary. My throat tightened. Poison, quick and tidy, the kind you use when you don't want noise. I looked at Fritz. He met my gaze steadily.